As always, I'd like to thank Mark Hart, who is our co-host for the evening, afternoon, or morning, depending on where you are. He posts all of these sessions and hosts the OC Callers website. He puts all the sessions, all the material, and is the guru extraordinaire for keeping all of us on the straight and narrow and fixing any of the problems with these sessions. A lot of the time, the people behind the scene, like Mark, they do not get the credit that they deserve. I can tell you right now, I definitely acknowledge the credit. Jeff, can you give us a wave, please, so everybody can see where you at?
I'm doing the real live wave,
The
not the
real
funny
live
hand that
wave.
Mark had.
Today, I am extremely pleased to have Jeff Priest with us. Jeff Priest is, he says international, but I would say more quintessential caller, teacher, and entertainer, as you could probably tell from some of our comments earlier. Now, Jeff is one of those anomalies. He started dancing at age 7 and started calling at age 9. He's somewhere around 320 years old right now, so he's got a lot of experience. He just ages well. But seriously, he is one of those quintessential callers. He's been calling and teaching party nights through the A2 program. He's got clubs at Dance Basic, Mainstream Plus, Plus DVD, Advanced 1, and Advanced 2, all as separate groups and organizations, or in some cases combined. He's been training callers for, well, what, since 1985,
Yep.
86? Yeah, 1985. He's been working on caller training, caller coaching. He works with a lot of new callers, shares his knowledge and his insights. He works with experienced callers, with new callers, and with the experienced callers, he brings them back to the reality to refresh what they knew and didn't know. And he introduces them a lot to new ideas by bringing them back to the old stuff, as well as just putting in a whole brand new ways of looking at things. He runs his own schools through the Canadian Callers College, which you can see the CCC on his shirt there. And he's worked in several schools across Canada and the US. He runs the gamut. Pretty much any topic related to calling, Jeff will be able to present on it and present thoroughly on it. He's been with Caller Lab since 81. He's been on several committees, Mainstream Plus Advance. He was a chairman of the International Advisory Committee. And if you want to know what that's about, that's all of the international callers, of which right now there's probably more international callers than there are callers in the US as far as Caller Lab goes, if they wanted to join Caller Lab. And Jeff was the chair of the International Callers Advisory Committee for at least 10 years. I mean, I could list all the positions he served, but I would just basically run out of time. Suffice it to say, national, international, boards, committees, local, provincial, every aspect, Jeff has got his fingers in most of the pies. He's very active and thankfully shows no sign of slowing down, which is really good for us. I am going to make a shameless plug here, Jeff. Just got 4 books out on calling and teaching that are very worthwhile references, especially for new callers, because I liken his books kind of like the Harry Potter sequence of books. Those books will grow with you as a caller as you grow as a caller. They seem to develop as you develop your skills, and you'll find yourself going back to them a number of times. There's 2 books, I believe, 2 books for mainstream and plus, and then there's another 2 books for basic system of calling. If you want more information of that, I'm pretty sure we can make a few minutes at the back end of this program to talk about it. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce our feature present for today, Jeff Priest. Thank you for coming, Jeff.
Thank you, Mel. My pleasure. Glad to be here. Um, as Mel said, I've been in this for quite a while. I'm celebrating 56 years of calling. I saw when Kip was on, he said he's done 60. I think he's older than me because he started when he was older. I started when I was a kid. I had the benefit of having a father who was a full-time caller. So I had an in-house mentor, which was really good and worked well. I've been involved in this activity full-time for a long time. I took a period to work in a corporation, and then I still kept calling. So I've been calling for the whole 56 years. I haven't stopped at all. And I find that things are changing dramatically. But the books that I've written, and we'll talk about those later, because they're part of the system that we're going to go through today as well, they are timeless. And you'll see why they're timeless when I start showing them to you. But first off, what we're going to do today is we're going to talk about something that's very near and dear to my heart, which is teaching. And as soon as I get the right screen, did that work? No, we're not shared, are we? Hang on. There we are. I got it. There we go. Okay. Now we're up. So, how to be a successful teacher? There's a lot of things that you need to know, you need to learn. If you don't know them, you need to work through them. Things that we're going to be discussing today specifically, the items that we're going to be looking at are, you're going to know who your students are. Just going to move this out of my window a little bit here. All right. You're going to know and use all 4 learning styles. You've got to know the Call Lab definition for what you're teaching. You've got to know the styling. You've got to know the timing of the calls that you're teaching. And you need to develop lots of patience. Don't overteach. Overteaching is an issue. And you need to use some humor when you teach. Humor is what's going to create part of your fun, but not all of your fun. So who are your students? What's the age of your students? If you've got retirees, you're going to have to teach a little differently than if you've got 30-somethings. 30-somethings are going to learn a little bit quicker than retirees. If you've got teenagers, teenagers are going to learn a lot faster than your 30-somethings, who are going to learn faster than your retirees. So you have to have a flexible program based on who your customer is. Terminology. What are you going to use for your terminology? Do your students speak English? Let me tell you a funny story. About 25 years ago, I was hired by the University of Toronto to come in and do a student dance. I had been doing student dances for them for years. Got the phone call, said you're going to have 200 students, it's a 2-hour dance, here's the date, we'll see you then. I said, okay, great. Didn't ask too many questions because I'd already done a lot of student dances for them. So I get into the hall, I get all set up, and I find out that of 200 students, I'm the only male in the room. Not only that, out of 200 students, I'm the only person whose native language was English. I had 200 Japanese women that I didn't know I was walking into. Terminology was really kind of weird. Fortunately for me, there was a teacher there who was fluent in both English and Japanese. While I'm in the middle of the floor wearing my head mic doing all my introductions of square dancing, she's standing up on the stage with my spare mic, translating everything I'm saying. The calls were the calls. That was no big deal. The calls were the calls. What she did was every time I told them what they were supposed to be doing as far as the description goes, she would translate it all into Japanese. Now, we ended up having a lot of fun in those 2 hours, but I got to tell you, it was pretty tense at the beginning because why? I didn't know who my students were when I was walking into that room. Got to know who your students are. It's important. Gender. What are you going to do with gender? I had 200 women standing in a room. I can't use men and ladies, or men and women, or boys and girls. I can't use any of that. So we settled on bows and bells. So I had the translators say that everybody on the left is a bow, everybody on the right is a bell. So whenever I refer to bows and bells, they knew which person had to move. They just paired them up and it was no big deal. Everybody took it in stride. A new language. You better believe it was a new language. It was a new language for them, for sure. You know, your students are learning a new language, and a lot of callers don't take that into consideration. They don't think about that. I mean, if you walk down the street and you said to somebody, spin the top, they're going to say, yeah, what's that? Well, it's a language. It's a language all on its own. And that's something that you have to consider when you're taking people in off the street and teaching them this activity. We know the calls. To us, it's common. To them, it isn't. So you need to realize that the new language is something they have to be able to learn. And oh, by the way, when they learn this new language, every word has an action. Every word has an action. So now they have to remember the word and the action that goes with it, and oh, they got that long to get it down to their feet. This is not an easy activity to learn right off the bat. A lot of callers don't realize that. They've been dancing for so long that They just don't put too much consideration into how difficult it is for a new dancer. Willingness. Now there's a biggie. Most of your people will be happy to be there, probably 90 to 95%. But you've got that 5% of those people who have been cajoled, teased, threatened. The wife says, we're going square dancing and you are going to like it. He is looking for the very first time that he can fail and say, see, told you I couldn't do it. You've got to be able to deal with that and handle that with that person. And there'll be more than one. All right? So you need to make sure that you have a little bit of levity going on there, and that as you go through your calls, you just kind of work them out nice and easy. Remember, it's a relaxing thing. Learning styles. There are 4 different learning styles, and you need to address all of them when you're teaching. Visual. Your visual learners can watch it be done. So if you can be in the middle of the floor and you can do a demonstration, teach the call, walk the call, that's great. They will love you for it. Next one is auditory learners. Auditory learners, they listen to you. They're going to take every word you say and say, this is gospel. This is it. That's what he said to do. That's what we're going to do. Be sure that you're correct. Be sure that you're using the original definition so that they get the first one as the original definition. Because anything said over the microphone is very hard to take back. You need to make sure that what you tell them is correct because they're going to hold you to it. Reading. Make sure your dancers know about terminations. Either that or print out the Color Lab definition list and provide it to your dancers. If they know about terminations, all the definitions are up there. That, by the way, will also help your visual dancers. Not going to do much for your auditory dancers, but your visual dancers and reading dancers, they should really know about terminations. Make sure you would advise them of it. Tell them how to get there, tell them how to go through the calls, and they'll be able to look at all those icons move, and they'll be able to read the definitions. And the last one is kinesthetic or tactile. That's me. I got to do it. If I don't do it, I don't understand it. I have to walk through the call. Once I've put my feet in the place where they belong, I'll remember that call. And there are people like that. So you've got to deal with all 4 of those learning styles. All right, so when you're teaching, how do you deal with all those things? You provide your dancers with as much information as you can to make them successful at the dance. That's going to make you successful as a teacher. You're not going to specifically give them homework, although there are callers who do that. There are callers who give their dancers homework. I don't believe in that because it's a recreation for them. They're there for fun. However, if it works and you can do it that way, it's helpful. Color Lab definition. Always use it on a new teach. Always use it on a new teach. Give them the correct definition. You may have something else in your mind that works, and that's great. You can tell them that later. But on a new teach, make sure they get the actual definition of the call. Call analysis sheet. This is going to benefit you more than you would ever believe. If you have a call analysis sheet for every call that you call, you will have more information in your brain than you will realize. All right, so Color Lab has a sheet on their website available to them called Analyzing a Call. Asks for a lot of information, gives you some check boxes, asks you for the definition. It's a good sheet, and it's been used for many, many years. At Canadian Callers College, we developed another sheet based on our students. Over the years, our students have found that there's information not readily available on this particular sheet that they felt would be important to have. So we developed our own call analysis sheet. It's got all the same information that Color Labs has, but everything that's highlighted, we've added. And this is from students that we've had over the years and suggestions they've put out. All right, Color Lab dance program. That's probably a good piece of information to have on your call analysis sheet, so you know which program it actually belongs to. How many dancers are involved in a call? You don't find that on the Color Lab sheet. It's good to know whether it's 2 dancers, 4 dancers, 6 dancers, 8 dancers. How many people are you keeping busy? The timing of the call. Now, the Caller Lab one has the timing of the call right down at the bottom. It says how many steps to dance comfortably. That's good information. But the timing of the call, is it the same for all dancers involved? If not, who waits? Well, a perfect example of that is dive through. Dive through is given 6 beats. How many beats do the outside people get to come in? 2. That's it. They're done in 2 beats. What do they do for the next 4 beats? If you don't know that that's happening, while the others step out and do their California twirl and adjust, these guys are just standing there waiting. Well, if you've got that on your sheet and you know that in 2 beats you've got to have the center bodies doing something, then you call your dive through. Centers right and left through. Centers touch a quarter. Centers pass through. Whatever you want them to do, they're not standing around waiting for the next call. Good information to have. Next yellow line says, can roll or spread be called after the call? That's handy to know. If you're going through your call analysis sheet, these things will log into your brain once you fill out that sheet. So it's all good information to have. Can the call be fractionalized? And you're looking at this thinking, we're talking here about basics. Yes, we are. Are there any basic calls that can be fractionalized that you can think of off the top of your head? Let me give you 2. Do-si-do and half sachet. We can do a do-si-do once and a half. We end up in tandem. We can do a half sachet, or we end up back to back, sorry. We can do a half sachet once and a half. We end up in tandem. All right, so yes, do this for every call you call, because there are things that once you really sit down and start thinking about it, things will come to your mind. Did it change the sequence? Gee, that's probably a good piece of information, especially if you're a site caller. You might want to know if they're out of sequence by something you called. Okay, so, and again, who? Men, women, both? So you need to look at those aspects of the calls. Should any calls be reviewed before this call is taught? Absolutely. If you're going to fractionalize a call, you want to make sure they know how to do the original call properly first. Good example, half sachet. Half sachet says right body slides in front of left body while left body slides over to right position. If you do that and you have the boy standing on the right and the girl standing on the left, and you call it again, 9 times out of 10, the boy is going to let the lady go first because he's a gentleman. And you can't have that happen, because if you do a half sachet once and a half, you should have the boy in the front if you're doing it from a standard couple. Okay, so those are things that students that we've had over the years felt would be important to know. So that one is available on our website. It'll also be in a handout that you're going to get, or that will be available after this. So if that's of interest to you, by all means, feel free to take it and use it. If you go to our website, there is a PDF there that's fillable, which means you can just download it and type them on your computer, and then store them all on your computer if you choose to do that. Shortcuts or hints. That's going to be what you are actually going to tell your dancers. If you're going to use a shortcut or a hint, make sure they know it's your shortcut or a hint. And don't give it to them as gospel. I always pre-phrase it by saying, if this works for you, this is what I do. Okay? So think about that. Shortcuts and hints are okay, but make sure they know the true Caller Lab definition. An example of a teach, we've already discussed that. If you can do a physical example of a teach, by all means, that's the best thing you can do. If you've got a headset, you can be out on the floor, do that. If you are attached to a cord and a microphone on the stage, then try and get a couple or 2 of dancers that you know, that dance well, that can follow the instructions, and have them do your teach, or your demo for you anyways. Not the teach, but the demo. You can put them out there. All right, remember there are three definitions to every call. 3 definitions to every call. The Caller Lab definition, the definition that you are going to create for your dancers after you've taught them the Caller Lab definition and given them your shortcuts or hints. That becomes a caller's definition. And then there's going to become the dancer's definition. And the dancer's definition is the one that they create in their own minds to remember how to do the steps that they've been told to do. There will be 3 definitions for every call. And when your dancer comes up to you and says, I forget how to do this particular call. Can you help me do this? And they say, well, what's the name of it? Oh, I don't know the name of it, but what happens is I'm hanging on to somebody and I turn half by the right, and then I hang on to somebody else and I go, I think I'm supposed to go 3/4, but I don't know what the other person was doing. All right, they just described spin the top to you, but they had their own definition and they couldn't remember what the last part of it was. All right, so dancers will come up with their own stuff. Be aware of that. Styling. Styling is part of the definition. Caller Lab puts styling with every single call they list. The styling is there. Do we teach it? Not so much. Classes now are shorter. Hall rent is more expensive, so classes have become shorter. Some classes have doubled up. Basic and mainstream go together, so you don't get the time to spend on styling that you would like to. I hope you would like to spend time on styling, but we don't seem to get it, so it tends to get put onto the back burner. That's not a good place for it. Whenever we can teach styling, that would be best. I admit I don't teach styling right out the gate all the time. I do as often as I can because it makes the calls much smoother and it makes the dancers enjoy them a lot more. Eventually, I'm hoping that you would be able to teach all of your dancers the styling for all of the calls that you're calling. It makes the dance much smoother. It makes the dancers enjoy it more. Timing. This isn't really timing. This is but actually how you're going to teach your call. You're going to give the dancers the name of the call before you teach it. Tell them what you're going to learn. Tell them what you're going to teach them. Then you're going to tell them what position they're starting in. And if you haven't given them positionings yet, if you haven't told them about the setups, you need to. You need to make sure that that is part of your teaching as well. You're going to give them the Caller Lab definition on the first teach. The new teach, always use the Caller Lab definition. If you don't have a copy of those in your case, print them and carry them with you. You're going to tell them when the call ends. That's critical. I can't tell you the number of times that I've talked to dancers or I've gone to call a dance at a guest club and I've called head square through 4, swing through. And the boys ran and they did a Ferris wheel because they had no idea that the swing through ended after the center straight. Nobody had ever told them that because their caller always called swing through, boys run Ferris wheel. That's what they always did. Make sure your dancers know when the call is over, where it ended. Make sure they know how many beats it takes to do the call. You know, when you teach a do-to-do to your dancers, do they know it takes 6 steps to do it? Do you tell them it takes 6 steps to do it? That's 6 beats of music. Those are pieces of information they need if you want them to dance with the music, which is really what we're hoping for. And then tell them the name of the call again. Make sure they know what they just did. Okay? Now, you can go through that all over again with them and do it the same. Do the name of the call, starting position, and walk them through the definition as they go. Then tell them when it's over. Before you give the next call, you tell them that it's over. This is the end of it. That's all there is to it. Give them the beats that they did, the steps they took, and the name of the call again. Pattern music. Pattern music is a very personal thing, but you need to have some really good pattern music in your case. There are a lot of records out there, a lot of good music out there that is really modern music now. I mean, it's really some good stuff to dance to, but it's not good stuff to teach to. There's just too much stuff in the way. The music is so good that the dancers get involved in the music that they don't really pay attention to the calls. When you're teaching, your pattern music should have a nice solid beat. A nice solid beat. Now, I'm not talking, you don't have to go out and get a piece of fiddle country twang if that's not your thing. That's okay. But just get something that has a good beat to it so the dancers know where that step is going to happen. All right? And they can go through their steps that way. Singing calls. Again, singing calls are a very personal thing. You have to have a singing call that says something to you. You don't have to be a singer by the way. We were talking about that earlier with Mel. I'm a trained vocalist, but that's my option. I do this for a living, and that's my option. But you don't have to even sing. If you have a good piece of music, a good sing-along piece of music, your dancers will do all the singing. You don't have to sing. And if you learn your music well and you have a volume control, then you can raise the volume during the breaks or during the taglines. And you can just kind of lower your voice a little bit if you're uncomfortable with singing. But everybody, believe it or not, everybody has the ability to sing. Some sing better than others, but everybody has the ability to sing. That's just a fact. So pick music that works for you. If you pick something that's in a really high key, I'll tell you, there's a lot of royal music that I cannot use. I do have a lot of royal records in my repertoire, but there's a lot of it that I can't use because all the stuff that Larry Letson recorded and a lot of the stuff that Jerry recorded was just way too high for my voice. And yeah, you can pitch control it, but you know what? It really changes the song a lot. So you have to pick music that actually works with your voice. And that will give you more comfort in doing your singing calls. But you need to do a singing call, in my opinion, with every tip. Every tip. From the very first minute they walk in the door, the first tip, when you finish that first patter, you're going to give them a singing call. It's going to be a simple sequence, but you're going to give them a singing call. So they understand that that is part of the dance. Adjust your tempo. When you're teaching and you give your dancers the number of beats that each caller is supposed to take, and they're a little behind because they take more steps than that, a lot of callers just let them do that. And they forfeit the tune, they forfeit the song. I suggest, and what I try to do, is adjust the tempo. Bring the tempo down so that they can step in time with the music. As they get more comfortable with the call, bring your tempo back up. Now, don't jump it right up because that'll just throw them off completely. You want to just bring it back up gradually. And all of the digital music that we have today, every program that's out there has the ability to tempo change. So don't be afraid to do that. I would far rather they dance on the beat of the song that they're listening to rather than get off step and end up dancing like they're fighting going uphill all the time. Modules. Modules are critical when you're teaching. I'm primarily a sight caller, but I use all the systems. I use memory. I mean, I know that if I call head square through 4, swing through, boys run, Ferris wheel centers pass through, I'm looking at corner. I know that. That's memory. That's just there. I've called it so many times it's there. But modules, if you have a module, then you know before you leave home that whatever you're going to call to those dancers tonight, whatever you're going to teach them, they have a far better chance of success because your module works. You know it works. Before you leave home, it's there. Right? So when you're teaching, your modules are what's going to get you through to make your dancers more successful. And that's what it's all about. Because if you're sight calling on newbie dancers and you have half the floor go down, then you have an issue. Because if you haven't been able to get a good square to watch, you're not going to get anybody back. And then they're all going to fail. And that's just not a good thing to happen on your regular class night when you're teaching these people. You want to keep them very successful as possible. And modules are the best way to do it. Remember, you need lots of patience. This is an adult recreation. They're there for fun. They're not there to get hammered. They're not there to get beat up. They're not there to feel silly by making a mistake and then having somebody have to correct them for it. It's a recreation. Remember, a lot of these people come out for a date night. How well do you think that date's going to go if they get so frustrated with dancing they go home mad at each other? That's a pretty poor date night. So it's an adult recreation. You've got to keep it lighthearted. You've got to keep it interesting, but not overwork them. It's a new language, as we said earlier. It's a new language. You've got to keep that in mind. These people don't know any of these words. and they don't know any of the actions that go with these words. So you're teaching them both the language and the action, and they've got to learn to get through all of that together. Relaxed. Keep it relaxed. If you're tense, if you go in there and you're all tense and uptight, they're all going to be tense and uptight. You've got to be able to just kind of bring it down and relax. And you know, you're there as their entertainer. You're there to give them an evening to forget their day. And if you've had a bad day, too bad. You've got to leave it at the door, because you're there as the entertainer. You can't go in there feeling bad. You can't go in there down. You've got to be in there happy they're there to join you, happy they've come with you to dance tonight, and you've got to make them feel good about being there and about dancing. All right, so keep it very relaxed and make sure that you're always upbeat. Know when to drop it. And that's a problem for a lot of callers. They don't know when to drop it. If you've got a call that you're working on, and you've got, let's say you got 4 squares on the floor, and 3 of them are just sailing through it, and one of them, half those people are now red-faced. Drop it. Give them a grand square, finish it, and then do a singing call. Don't use that call in that tip. That's okay. You can use it next time. Come back and work it in the next tip. Hopefully in the next tip, those 4 will end up in different squares. And so now they'll have a whole different opportunity of learning. All right? But you don't want to make people really feel bad. I saw a caller once, and he was trying to teach a call. He was having great difficulties because, well, the main reason was he was using his own rules, which was really kind of silly. But anyway, he actually had 2 couples walk off his floor and out the door. And I doubt very much that they ever came back, because he didn't know when to drop it. You need to know. Be complimentary. Always tell your dancers how good they're being, even if they're not. Even if they're not doing it perfectly, that's okay. You know, I always say there's no such thing as a perfect square dancer. Oh, and by the way, there's no such thing as a perfect square dance caller either. We're all in that room just to have some fun. All right? Don't let them think that because they've made a mistake, they're bad and they'll never be a good dancer. Full moon equals party nights. Ask any caller who's been calling more than 10 years, and they will tell you that you don't ever run a workshop on a full moon night. It's not going to happen. When you plan your program by your calendar. Look at the calendar, find it when the full moon is, and plan that as a party night. Because you're not going to teach them anything. I have no idea why it is like that, but it is. All the years I've been calling, never been able to teach on a full moon. It just doesn't happen. So, you want to have party nights. You need a good repertoire of party nights. You need to build singing calls into particular party nights. Halloween, Valentine's, love songs, summer songs, 50s nights, big band nights. Any of those will work. Just make it a party night when the full moon happens, and everybody will love you for it. Don't overteach. Your teach tip should never go longer than 10 minutes. If it goes longer than 10 minutes, you've lost the attention of all the people who got it right off the bat. They're done. They're now thinking about the grocery list. They're thinking about house cleaning. They're thinking about getting the car repaired. And then when you come back to it, they blow it because their mind just isn't there anymore. All right? 10 minutes. That's the longest your teach should be. And if you haven't finished the call in 10 minutes, drop it. Don't use it in the singing call. Finish it up on the next tip. Okay? Always use the definition. Be concise and clear in your teaching. And that, by the way, will help you keep it to 10 minutes. We used to have a caller in our area who he would talk for 10 minutes. And by the time he was finished, the dancers were so confused they had no clue what they were supposed to be doing. And oftentimes he ended it with what they shouldn't do in this particular call. Don't do it this way. And because that was the last thing they heard out of his mouth, that was the first thing they did. So you need to be concise and clear. And if there is a pitfall that you want to discuss or you want to tell them about, if there's a pitfall, do it first. Actually, what I do is I do the teach first and I wait for the pitfall to happen. And then when it happens, it gives me the opportunity to point it out and say, I just noticed something. Let's talk about this for a minute. And so then what we'll do is we'll discuss the pitfall. And then I will remind them of the rules. All right, so the last thing they hear is the definition. not the pitfall. All right? If you're going to talk about a pitfall, make sure it happens at the beginning of your discussion. Reteach. Make sure that you reteach. Unless you have everybody on your floor, when you're doing your initial teach, there are people who missed it. And when you get up for the next tip, you make sure that you do a reteach, because those people aren't going to learn by osmosis. They've got to learn by you. So you need to make sure that everybody gets covered on your teaches. When I do my programs, generally what I do with all of my clubs is my first tip is a warm-up tip, because there's always people who are late. My second tip is a review of the last week's teach. My third tip is a teach of a new call. 4, 5, and 6, because we usually dance for an hour and a half. So 4, 5, and 6 are dance tips where I will review whatever is necessary. So if I have people come in and they weren't in the third tip teach, then I will do a quick review of it in tip 4. If everybody was there, then they dance in tip 4. All right, so my program is flexible enough that we can fit all of those teaches in. And those are the things you need to consider when you're teaching a club. Now, I have one club that's a bit of a problem because we run basic and mainstream together. And I only get 3 tips with my basic dancers, and then I alternate tips for the next hour and a half. And so it's a bit of a challenge making sure that my basic dancers get all of their calls in, but we do make sure that they're always on the floor for a basic teach. We never have any of our basic dancers sitting out. We make sure we fill squares with mainstream dancers. If anybody has to sit out, it's a mainstream dancer. So that's how we look after that. But it still is a bit of a challenge when I have to split the tips like that. Add some humor. Keep it lighthearted. Always keep your humor lighthearted. Stay away from religion. Stay away from politics. That can just get you into a whole heap of trouble. And, well, we mentioned Paul earlier. Paul was the only guy who could get away with dumb blonde jokes because Judy was a blonde and she allowed it to happen. But don't do dumb blonde jokes either. Sarcasm. Don't use sarcasm. People get very offended by sarcasm. And even if it's done in the nicest of ways, people get offended by sarcasm. It's really something you want to stay away from. Don't pick on anyone. And sometimes that's hard to do because sometimes there's people there you want to pick on. Once your club has been going for maybe 6 or 8 weeks and people get to know each other and they get chatting back and forth, you'll always find that there's somebody who wants to be the center of attention. And sometimes you can help them do that by kibitzing back and forth with them. But again, you don't want to pick on them. You just kind of kibitz back and forth with them, and that's okay. That'll work. But generally speaking, don't pick on anyone. Simple routines. You can use simple routines just to bring a smile to people's faces. All right, you can have them in lines of 4 facing out and say forward and back. No one says you have to be facing in to do that call, and they'll all get a giggle. There's simple things like that you can do that will create a smile. And don't do them too often or they don't get smiles anymore. Have fun. You need to have fun. You need to want to be there. And if you're not going to have fun with them, then they're certainly not going to have fun with you, because that's what it's all about as far as they're concerned. They're out here as a recreation. They're out here to have some fun, have a good time. And for them, that has to start with you. And if you're going to walk into your club and you're going to be all down and geez, I got a lousy headache tonight and I really don't want to be here, they're not going to want to be there either. That's exactly the way that they're going to feel, whether they do or not. So you have to go in there like you're walking on air every time, regardless of whether or not you are. You're being paid to do that. And the fun is going to start with the person who's got the microphone. That's the way it has to happen. Summary. So we're going to be aware of our customers. We're going to address all learning styles. We're going to use the Cololab definition for sure. We're going to introduce styling as we go as best we can. We're going to pick good music for timing. We're going to use singing calls every time. We're going to develop lots and lots of patience, because that's key. We're not going to overteach. And we're going to use humor and smile a lot because that's what's going to get us across to the floor. Now, this is going to be a two-part presentation tonight. On this first part, we've done the basics on teaching. Now, the next section is I'm going to introduce my teaching system to you and show you how it works and get you to understand how all of the components that we've just talked about will come together in that. But for the moment, how do you employ it? Party dance. How many of you do party dances? Just go out and do one night party dances for people. Get many of those? Yeah, there's a few hands going up. All right. They're a great thing to do. They're a lot of fun. But you're not going to employ much of any of what we've just talked about because they don't care. Half of those people have already imbibed in alcohol. You're going to be able to go through the names. You can give them whatever definition you like because they're not going to retain it. Chances are they're not going to come and dance in your club. But a lot of what we've discussed can still benefit you teaching these people and make you feel comfortable. Your first class night, everything we have talked about here, you are going to employ in your first class night and every night thereafter in your class. Club night. Oh, what the heck is a club night? And I really hate that term, but we have to discuss it. Apparently, people in beginners aren't square dancers until they've gone to mainstream or plus. I am vehemently against that. I don't believe that at all. As far as I'm concerned, they're square dancers 3 minutes after they hit the floor because they're dancing square dance calls. They're square dancers. So when we refer to club night here, we're referring to a night that is not your beginner class, but it's a night where you are still teaching. All right, so everything that's here that we've talked about, you will need to employ in your mainstream, your plus, and your advanced programs. It's all the same concept. It's all the same thoughts. So those are the things that we're looking at as far as where we employ our skills to be able to teach modern square dancing to people and let them have fun doing it. On what we've been discussing so far, don't ask anything else about the other program that I'm going to look at yet, but on what we've been discussing, are there any questions that we need to address before we move on?
I've got a few questions here that were asked, pretty general. When you said willingness, this is a common expression. It's usually she brings him to 3, and if you're doing your job right as a caller, he'll be dragging her to the rest of them. The idea is to have fun. I think you pretty much summarized that quite succinctly. Question on the definitions. You said to use them. The question is, do you give the definitions out or just explain them correctly when you're teaching?
I usually have a set of definitions on the stage. I have the Color Lab definitions on the stage, but when I teach the call, I give them the true definition that they're going to read if they so desire to come up and read it. Yeah, I don't purposely hand them the sheet themselves.
I think that was the question: was do you give them the definition? On homework, do you give homework like pre-reading or using terminations to see what's coming up? And I think you've pretty much answered that in your session. From what I remember, you don't like giving homework. They're there for a night's entertainment, and that's the end of it.
Correct.
Yeah. Can you provide the call analysis sheet? I have posted the call analysis sheet. Mark is going to be putting it on the website, and I put the link in the chat as well. It's at the Canadian Callers College. There was a question on styling. Do you teach men palms up, ladies palm down, or right hand, left hand?
I teach men palms up, lady palms down. Yeah. And I do that specifically because on a first night, you have no idea how many people have no idea which is their right and which is their left. Yeah. But they know if they're a man, they know which way is up and which way is down. Yeah. That they know. So that's what
I wanted to add on that. I sent this to the people asking the questions, but the Color Lab definitions defines men palm up Ladies, palm down, unless you are in the same gender.
Correct.
The use of palm is, I think, 45 times in the definition. Every one of them is men palm up, ladies palm down, unless it's a palm-to-palm movement, with one exception, and that's the Varsuvian promenade. So if you go back and read the definitions, the answer to that question is there. Full moon, the comment on a full moon schedule. Trying to read what I got. Hang on, I'll just go back. I'm writing these. I was told a full moon does not necessarily mean the lunar cycle. That's good for scheduling a party night once a month, but be prepared to adjust any night to a party night. That's what a full moon night is. Do you agree with that?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
I agree with that completely.
And how
Which
much
means
of a,
your program has to be versatile.
yeah. And how much of a break in between tips do you have, because you do a mixed program, or do you even take breaks?
Yes, I take breaks, and the breaks are 4 minutes, and I have a timer set on my computer, and the bell, and it's set with a school bell. And so when the bell goes, I say, "That's it, folks. Bell's gone. Time to dance." Everybody hears it come through the speakers.
Okay, that was all the questions on there. There was one which was Bob Elling. I noticed when you said callers have to learn when to drop it. Bob had a big grin come up on his face. I didn't know if he had a comment to make there or not.
You're muted, Bob. Bob, you're muted. Can't hear you.
Bob, you're muted.
I remember once I got so involved in a teach in less than 20 minutes. And that's without the calling part.
Ouch.
And it just could not communicate with these people. I kept trying to figure out different things. And I knew afterwards it was totally wrong that I had done it. But yeah, I've been notorious about over teaching at points. But at the same time, Jeff, I'm recognized in the area as the best teacher they've ever seen. So, but that doesn't mean not everybody is teachable.
That's true.
All right, that's all the questions I have. I would suggest, oh, one just came up. With the timing of calls and the particular order, do you adjust so they can keep dancing? Or how do you adjust? So if the timing of the calls, if the dancers aren't dancing to the timing of the calls, how do you adjust just so they can keep dancing?
I adjust the tempo. We did talk about that. I will adjust the tempo.
Okay.
I mean, if they're really way off and it means that the tempo has to be that slow, then I will back off and give them extra time. But I would prefer to adjust the tempo and let them still dance with the music.
Okay. So at this point, I would suggest we go to the second part of the presentation.
Okay.
We are now at 15 minutes to the hour, so we'll go to the second part of the presentation, and any questions that you have, we'll save for the open discussion at the end. If you have any more questions, by all means, send them in.
All right. So this is my full teaching system. All right. It's a building block system, and it is based on modules, purely based on modules. The benefits are many, and the system is very flexible once the core 20 calls are taught. All right. Now, John brought this up 2 weeks ago, so that's why we're addressing it now. My core 20 calls are circle left, circle right, forward and back, do-sa-do, swing, partner or corner, promenade, couples and singles, Alaman left, weave the ring, right and left grand, stars, rights and left, pass through, U-turn back, separate and around 2, courtesy turn, ladies chain 2 and 4, lead right. I also do lead left, but it's not on the list. Veer left. I also do veer right. Bend the line, right and left through, star through, California twirl, and dive through. This program I spend, and I'll show you how the book is written out, 6 weeks to teach these 20 calls. And you just said, oh my God, 6 weeks to teach 20 calls? I can do that in 2. Yep, you probably can. I can too. The dancers can't learn it in 2. And the foundation would be extremely weak. I want to make certain that I have a very solid foundation to be able to teach the rest of the program. So when I go through these calls and the whole thing is laid out week by week, tip by tip. When I go through this program in my 6 weeks, my dancers can do all this stuff blindfolded. So that when it comes to learning the rest of the program, one call at a time, no issues. They sail through it. All right, so when you open the book, this is one of the first page of the index. That's what it looks like. The core 20 calls are highlighted with an asterisk. Anything that doesn't have an asterisk isn't a core 20 call. And then it takes you right from your first night. I have all the dancers start in a big circle. I have a remote mic and I'm in the middle of the floor and we work from there. And here's the answer to the question. Tell your dancers you are going to have them join hands. To do this, tell the men to put their palms up and the ladies to put their palms down on the man's hands. Tell the man to rest his thumb lightly and stress lightly, not a grip, not a squeeze, not a pinch, lightly over the lady's hand. Then just tell them to circle left. Guess what? They're dancing. They're dancing. They're circling left, they're dancing. Circle right. We move it the other way back. Then we have them drop hands, walk single file, put the lady in the lead. It's all done to music. They're all moving and they're dancing. We tell them it's a single file promenade. Then I call stop. Everybody stops. I say look in the center. Or I say ladies, turn around, face your partner. There we go. And then I teach them how to do a do-sa-do from there. I'm in the middle of the floor with my wife and we teach a do-sa-do. We show it to them. All right, so we're giving them the definition and we're showing them. We've already taken care of 2 of our learning styles right off the bat. All right, it's not a real difficult call, so the readers are probably okay with it. And the kinesthetic dancers, everybody's going to do it right now, so they do their do-sa-do. All right, so we've covered pretty well all 4 learning styles very quickly in the first set. And we have the ladies turn back again, single file promenade. They already know how to do that. All right, and then we go, with music again, and then I say, everybody face the center, look at me, look at me. And they all turn and look at me. I say, join your hands, circle left. And we circle left. We go through that all over again. All right, the whole process is right there. Once we get all those things done and we're ready to put them into squares, at this point, where the break is there, and it's not in the book because when this book was written a few years back, there were not, and there probably still are not, a lot of callers doing Sicilian circles. But at this particular point, I would do a Sicilian circle with these folks. I would prepare them by teaching a wheel around, which is not part of my core 20. It is part of my party dances. I teach them a wheel around when we're doing the promenade in the big circle. And then once I've taught them that, we'll stop the ring, and I will go physically myself around the ring, and I will tap every other couple on the shoulder and say wheel around. And they will turn to face the couple behind them. That will then give me a Sicilian circle. So in my Sicilian circle, now I can teach pass through, I can teach right hand stars, left hand stars, and I use the term footprints. So that when they're in their Sicilian circle, I'll say, in your circle, join hands, circle left, come back to your footprints. I want to keep that formation so that when I do the pass through, it's going to work, that everybody's going to end up facing somebody new. I teach the pass through and I say, oh, we have a new bunch, look at this. Say hello. And I will do that as often as it is needed in order to get everybody comfortable, or particularly to split up people, specifically to split up people. Because if groups come in together, I don't want them squaring up together. I want them to learn independently of each other. All right. So once we're done with the Sicilian circle, then I put them into squares and then we carry on with the rest of the book from here. I don't do that all the time at my club. My first club night, I don't necessarily do a Sicilian circle. It depends on how many people we have. Sicilian circle works better, in my opinion, if you have more people. I was doing a corporate party a few years ago. We had 400 employees. They rented a huge building. It was wonderful. My Sicilian circle went on for 20 minutes because I moved employees away from each other because they were all sitting at their own tables gathered together. And it was a great way of mixing people up. All right, so this is how your night is laid out for your first night. By the way, here in this one, if we look down to this part here, we're telling them that we're going to teach the heads only up to the middle and back, sides only up to the middle and back. Do that a couple of times with the music. Heads only, promenade by twos halfway around. Well, they already know how to promenade. They did that in a big circle. No problem there. All right, now you have the sides promenade by twos. All right, go back here again. Okay, so we have them, and then we join hands and we circle left till we get back home. And guess what? We've just created the sequence for our first singing call. And they've gone through it a few times now. In your second tip, you're going to teach start by the left, back home, do-si-do, same lady, swing and promenade. Third tip, you're going to teach courtesy turn and ladies chain, two ladies chain. Fourth tip, you're not going to teach anything. You're just going to dance with them. They're just going to practice everything they've just learned. Fifth tip, you're going to teach four ladies chain if they're ready. If they're not ready, don't worry about it. No big deal. Sixth tip, usually the last tip if it's an hour-and-a-half dance, will be very relaxed and you will repeat the second or third tip. There's your singing call. The entire book is written like this. All right, so you've got your figure, you've got your open middle break. If you've got a grand square, you can use that in your very first singing call. That's for your very first tip. That's right after the patter. They're going to dance their very first singing call. And your sequence is heads promenade half, squeeze in sides, sides promenade half, squeeze in heads. Make sure you tell them because the inactive dancers will go to sleep if you let them. And then you have everybody join hands, circle left. When you're back home, face your corner, bow to her, swing and promenade. That's 62 beats with a full promenade. Now, my figures, the bow to her is 40 beats of music. My swing and promenade, I allow 24 beats. 8 for the swing, 16 for the promenade, assuming that it's going to be a full promenade. All right, if it's not, they get home a little bit early. That's okay. The swing, there aren't too many dancers who do an 8-beat swing anymore. So what's going to happen is your dancers are going to have a little bit extra time if they're getting behind. They can still find some time to work there. There's your second singing call. See what's highlighted? The four boys star left. That's what we said we were going to teach. The sequence, the figure, is the same as the one we just did. They're comfortable with it. Why not use it again? There's your third singing call. What are we teaching? Ladies chain. It's highlighted. You know right looking at it that that's all you're teaching is the ladies chain. Okay? Notice there is no shorthand here. I don't believe in shorthand. I've never used a shorthand. I write out in full. That way there's no confusion, no chance of making a mistake. Our fourth, guess what? There's nothing highlighted because you're not going to teach anything. You're going to use the figure from the second singing call or the third singing call. This is where you're going to introduce two sequences to them now. Okay, but they're very comfortable with both of them. They've done them both in singing calls previously. What's highlighted? Four ladies chain. But you know what? If they're not ready for it, don't teach it. Just do a heads chain, sides chain, heads chain back, sides chain back. No big deal. Remind your new dancers that they're learning a new language with new actions. It'll take them time to learn how they all fit together. Be very encouraging and extremely patient. If you want them to come back, be sure to be positive in all your comments and use music that is both upbeat and suitable for your audience. Again, know your customer. Make sure your music's going to match what they're accustomed to, what they're used to listening to. Remind your class you will be back next week and you look forward to seeing all of them there. Have fun on your last tip. Make sure you smile a lot and use a very upbeat song. If you can use a sing-along, that's the best way to go. Send them home singing a song. All right, so guess what? We've just used the first figure there. That's all we're using. We're not using anything that's difficult. It's all relaxed. And don't forget to tell them you'll see them all next week. Let them know you want them back. Let them know you expect them back. So once you're done going through that process and you've taught all the core 20 calls, then the rest of the book is written like this. So each page, in this case, has got 2 calls, and the highlighted call is the only one that is not a core 20. So guess what? That's the call you're teaching. separate and around 1. All right, so I saw some eyebrows go up when I had separate and around 2 as my core 20 call and not around 1. Why? Why? Because when you do a separate and around 1, you end up with same gender together. That's not going to be a real happy event for a lot of those guys on the floor that really didn't want to be there in the first place, standing holding on to a guy's hand. When you do a separate and around 2, if you do it from a home position, you all end up hanging on to your corner. Sashayed, yes, but they're holding on to opposite gender. They're still comfortable. All right, so you don't do the separating around 1 until you've got them comfortable dancing with each other and they know how to deal with the boy-boy, girl-girl line. So again, another attribute to the book is, you know right there, it's not going to be a surprise to you that you've got 2 boys together and 2 girls together. And when you call bend the line, you better say the words that follow it in this book. Hang on to same sex, because they'll let go of each other. And the center boy is going to grab the center girl and try and bend the line with her. All right, so all the clues are there. There's no surprises when you do your choreography. This is just an example of square throughs. So that one there, we're teaching square through 3. Again, they're highlighted. You know exactly what you're doing. So when the underline on the second line there in the bottom sequence says while, that means that while the sides are promenading halfway, have the heads do a right and left through. All right, the sides are taking 8 beats. We want the heads to be done the right and left through, because the square through 4 is going to come after that. All right, and that's going to actually equal your 64 beat promenade. If you wait, if you have the sides promenade and you wait till they get there, I mean, that's why it's highlighted while they're doing that, they've got to go. Then you'll be out of music before you're out of calls. All right, so there's the books. The books all look like this. They're actually a statement size. They're small, 8.5 by 5.5. When you open the book, because of the bind the way it is, they lay perfectly flat on your table. Perfectly flat. You can stand it in a stand, you can lean it on a table, you can lay it down, whatever you want to do with it. The only calls that are on there are calls that you're going to be teaching that are highlighted. Everything else is the core 20. That's why the foundation is so critical, because the foundation is what builds all of the teaching programs. All right? And with that, the same thing is true with the mainstream and with the plus books as well. The only call that's on there is the one that's highlighted, and that is the only mainstream call that you'll find in the mainstream page. All right? Each book has 4 sequences for each call. 4 sequences for each call. So you're not going to get your dancers used to swing through, boys run, Ferris wheel. All right? Each call has a different out, so that your dancers are not going to get into a habit of saying, oh, this call always follows this call. All right? This program has worked for me for 30 years. I've been using it every year. The reason it's written the way it is because I don't teach the same calls in the order that they're on the Color Lab program every year. It depends on my group. It depends on how adept they are at learning some calls or others. So this gives me the complete flexibility to teach in any order I desire. And all the choreography is there to do it. Any questions on the books?
I've got a couple of comments before we open it up. Okay, the first one was, but 6 people jumped in when you said lead to the left is not on the list. I just want to point out lead to the left was not on your list in the core 20. Yes, no. It is on the Color Lab list now. It was an oversight. It is now. So. It
wasn't on the list when the program was created.
So that has been corrected. Yes, yeah. Everybody was quick to jump on that one.
Yeah, okay.
Question. How do you deal with, for missing dancers, how do you deal with it when they miss a week or 2 in your system?
That is why when my program, if they miss a week, it's not an issue. Because in my program, my first tip is a warm-up. My second tip is a review of the previous week teach, like it was never taught before.
Yeah.
All right, so that's a brand new teach for those people coming in. Everybody else is giving a review on it. If they've missed a couple of weeks, to go away on vacation or a cruise and they're gone for 2 or 3 weeks, we try and get them aside so that we can get them into a square and walk them through. I don't leave anybody hanging. If there's people who have missed the teaches legitimately, then we try and work with a square. In each of my clubs, I have couples who are very willing to come out early and help out walk people through.
I'd also like to comment, I know you do this, Jeff, and I know a few others that do that. When you start your class, you say, if you are going to miss a week or two, give us a call and let us know when you come back so we can arrange for you to come in early, or if you want to have a session. And you've made yourself available on a number of occasions, as do many callers. So that's all part of the introduction to, just to show how flexible and how welcoming you are.
Yeah, yeah. And the other thing I do too is I have a chart at the front of the club. I have the Caller Lab list at the front of the club. And I put the date beside it. It's got three columns, and I put the date that it was taught. So dancers can come up and I'll call something and dancers will say, I don't remember, you never taught us that. I don't remember that. Well, it was probably a night they were away and they were taken aside and taught it off on their own. And I'll say, well, let's see if it's on the chart. So we look on the chart and sure enough, there's a date there. So that's okay. And, but that also allows people to come in and look at that chart and see when calls were taught and how much they've been dancing them. And the other thing I find, the benefit I find of that as well, is that people don't often, even though you've said the name of the call several times and you've called it several times, they still don't associate the words. And when they can see it on the list, then it really kind of sinks in with them. It makes a big difference.
Yeah.
Any other questions?
One was on your core movements when you're teaching. Says, is this okay for teaching hand? Oh, it's okay. The reference was square through 3. You had the center square through 3 followed by a star through. Is this okay for teaching because of the hand flow on your core movements? I think that was just a comment on body flow.
Okay. Was that on
I think on one of your figures or something. I'd have to go back, but I think you had what was it?
Let's
you
see.
you can go back.
I can go back.
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
This one here?
Yeah, heads promenade half, sides right and left through, side star through, centers square through 3, followed by a star through. So that would be a star through with the outside.
Yeah. That would be a star through with the outsides.
Yeah.
It's uncomfortable for one person.
Yeah. And you could easily put a do-si-do in there and then do a star through like you do in the bottom.
Yeah, you could. And we don't, because I don't do slide through. We do star through because it's a hand.
Yeah.
Sometimes I will do slide through with my own guys once I get a club going, and then that doesn't become an issue anymore. But it's preference.
Okay. Now the next question was, how long does it take you to using this? How long does it take you to get through the basic program?
32 weeks.
32 weeks. Take your time with it.
Yep. I want them to learn how to dance. I take my time with it. I'm not going to ram it down their throats. Can I teach it sooner? Yeah, I've taught it in as short as 24 and had fairly successful dancers with it. And that was only because we were working in a school and we lost a lot of nights. But I mean, my preference is that that's the foundation. Once we build the foundation out of basic and they are good, solid basic dancers, then learning the other programs is going to be a lot more comfortable for them and a lot easier for everybody else.
There's a comment here from Europe, which goes hand in hand with what you said about learning the language. They know the movement, how to explain it, but what they say is not the name. And that comment is, when dancers acquire the new language, they learn to understand it, but most never master how to speak it. So and that is so absolutely true. Trying to figure out that they're trying to say spin the top the way they describe it is sometimes a puzzle in itself.
Yeah.
And the last one is a general comment. This one's been asked a few times whether or not we charge for these presentations. Is there a fee or tip jar? No, there is not. All the callers that present and these sessions on the Sundays are the ones that's done with Don Beck and Dan Like, as well as the GSI Caller School when it was running, and it may come back up. Those are all free for callers, for dancers if they're interested to attend. because we just believe in what we're doing. And this is a good venue to learn a little bit more, dig a little deeper into some of the aspects. But thank you
Yeah,
for
I
the
think what
comment.
you're doing here is great. I think it's wonderful that you can get as many people involved in this as you are. And I think you're doing a great job with it. And I'm really pleased to be part of it tonight. I thank you for letting me join in.
Well, I was having a look at the next session that you have there on judging and judgment, caller judgment, that you did at the Canadian Callers College that one year. And I said that was one that is being asked as a topic. So we might just get you back to talk a little bit more about that, making the judgment calls on the floor sometime later.
Yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, we're now 10 minutes past the hour. I want you all to thank Jeff. Jeff is going to stick around for a bit to answer any questions or participate in the general discussion. But by all means, thank you very much. Mark is going to post the video session, as well as the copies of the presentation and the links, as well as the links to the call analysis sheet and the Canadian Callers webpage. I did post the link if you're interested in purchasing those books. They're on the Canadian Callers College webpage. Just go to purchase. All the books are there, and there's also a couple of other books if you're interested with just modules and choreography. Great resources, great teaching resources for a new or a newer caller. And I would like to just add on, this process that is used works for not only what Jeff is talking, but the basic program, the mainstream program, the plus program. It works at every level, and it also works in the SSD program, where you have essentially the same principle of taking your cores and building from there. Although there's a lot more movements and it's a lot faster, it's just a little more limited in the applications. So by all means, have a look at them. If you haven't got those books or you're interested in the resources, have a look and purchase. And thank you very much, Jeff, for coming in and joining us today.
Thanks, Mel. My pleasure.
The floor is open for comment.
Jeff, I have a comment, a question actually. Do you keep your classes open for so many weeks so that new people can come in, or do you just take your core and your core schedule and keep that going?
No, what we do is we have an introduction for 3 weeks. And depending on who comes in, we'll determine when I start the core. But I can do the first, as we've laid out, the first week. That's repeatable without any problem. The other thing we do in our class is, because we have a 32-week program, we run what we refer to as a blast in January for bringing new dancers to bolster the class. And so that blast, when we run it, I will try and bring those people up to where the rest of the club is at that point. All right, so we will teach the Core 20, and I know it can be taught quickly because I've done it in our blast. But then we spend more time with those people once we get them into the club, and we do a lot of review. And oftentimes we'll get people in early and go through stuff if they're having difficulties.
Thank you.
Just as a note, for a lot of callers, that Core 20 that's listed there, a lot of callers do that and more just on their one-night party nights.
Yep.
They'll add things like a grand square. They'll add things like a right and left through just on their party nights, just to get the dancers going. So it is very, very feasible to do it. And there's a lot of material for a lot of variety. So you don't have to be repetitive with just your 20 movements, and you can add 1 or 2 movements to that, and you've got a whole new program for 3 nights in a row.
Yeah. Yeah, but when you do your party nights, you don't care if they retain it. I mean, you can teach them as much as you like, because you don't care if they retain it. It's a party night. They're not coming out to your club. You're going to them, and they're just having a good time at a private party.
Bob, you've got your hand up. Bob Elling. Unmute yourself. You're still muted, Bob. Bob's used to his wife saying, "Would you be quiet?" We can't hear you, Bob. You've got to unmute your mic. There you go. I kept
clicking on it, it didn't work. But I wanted to make a comment on styling, because I think we agree on this. Well, to me, that was the heart of what dancing really is. But I have found out that my classes learn, once we get past a certain stage, if you've done styling, the dancers learn quicker and easier.
Yep.
And it helps that so many callers say, well, we don't have time to teach styling. Well, if you're short of time, that's what you need to do is teach them styling. That's my opinion.
That's
Would
an
you agree, Jeff?
excellent. Jeff
What's that?
said, would you agree with that comment?
Styling, as I said, the dancers become more familiar with the call and they can do them better. So if they're more comfortable doing them, then by all means, the styling is what's going to help get through it. And as he says, a lot of callers say, well, we don't have time to teach styling. I mean, how many of you here right now, when you teach a lady's chain, do you teach the man what it is he's actually supposed to do on a lady's chain? How many of you actually teach the man what he is supposed to do?
Yep.
I
Absolutely.
demoed it at Collar Lab. They had never
Yeah.
seen it.
Now, it's somebody had made a comment earlier that you do not have time not to teach styling. And it's the same, and it attests to what you said. You've got dancers that sometimes will just not get, 12 beats on a square through from a static square,
Yeah.
will not get it and use 20. It's well worth taking the time to get them to move to the music and do it in the right amount of time at the beginning than to try and fix it at the end. Guido, you had your hand up, and then Mike Gormley, you had your hand up. So we'll start with Guido.
Yeah. You said in one of your clubs you have to teach the basics for 3 tips, and then you have to alternate with mainstream dancers. This is what I do for over 20 years now. I teach the class before the club comes, and then we have no teaching for the rest of the night, but alternate dancing. But I'm dancing on a schedule, which means I have each tip has a time allotted for 12 minutes. And if the mainstream dancers don't get up on the floor and just waste their time, they still have their 12 minutes, even if they don't dance. So the tip starts at the top of the hour for the class, and at 12, the tip starts for the mainstream dancers. At 24th, the next tip starts for the class. This is something I'm doing for over 20 years now. Mm-hmm. And it proved to be very interesting for the dancers, and I can continue the system even after the class. So when I call something more difficult, I use the 2nd, 4th, and 6th tip of the night to do that, and then reinforce it for the weaker dancers later.
So if I understand that, Guido, you do your basic introduction first, and then the rest of the evening is a tip for tip with your basic and your mainstream class combined. So you do your teaching in basic, and then it's just an open dance. So all the mainstream dancers can dance every tip. Your newer dancers have had their half hour, 45 minutes, or an hour before, and they get the same dance program. But they can dance every alternate tip. And if you have 12 minutes booked for a tip, if the mainstream dancers take 4 minutes to get on the floor, they only get 8 minutes of dancing instead of 12 minutes. Is that correct? Okay. Yeah. Jeff?
Yeah, that's good. Our program that we have, it's only in one club. My other club is I get a basic class, and that's fine. But these guys because we're dancing in the school, and the time limit is governed by the school, we have to make sure that we can get specific time for our class people. But everybody's there. Everybody comes in at the beginning of the night. So the mainstream people are actually with the class people when they go through their 3 tips.
I've always found that everywhere I've gone across Canada and then in the States, if you have a mainstream group, the mainstream dancers and last year's class dancers always show up to support the new dancers. The plus dancers, advanced and challenge dancers
Can't be
very
brought.
rarely show up until their part of the evening starts.
Yeah.
Mike Gormley, you had your hand up.
Yeah, regarding 24-week classes and 32-week classes, et cetera, how do you emphasize to the dancers that it's important that they come every week? There's, I've run into dancers where, well, I got a cruise scheduled, so they're gone for a couple of weeks, or family comes down to visit, so they don't come to class because family's in town, and it creates havoc with the class trying to keep everybody on an equal par. I just wondered how you approach that.
I don't usually have too many issues with that. I mean, obviously
what do you specifically say to them
I
to
tell
try
them
to get them to come?
that our program is a progressive teach, and if they're going to miss nights, then they're going to need to catch up with what we taught on that particular occasion that they missed. I don't think you're ever going to be able to beat that anywhere. I mean, I think that's just a fact of life. It's, as I started out saying, it's a recreation for people. People have to have the ability to come and enjoy themselves, and if they've got something else they need to do, they're going to do it. And I think that's one of the beauties of taking a longer time to teach the program, because you can have people catch up a lot more easily. If you're running a program that that's going to take you 12 or 14 weeks to teach, and you're teaching 3 to 5 calls a night, and somebody misses 2 nights, they're now 6 to 10 calls behind. You think they're going to come back on the 3rd week? They're going to say, forget it. It's too much. I can't learn that fast. I just can't comprehend that much in one night. Whereas our program, we only teach 1 call per night. One call. That's it. That's all. They have fun. It's a dance. They're coming out to dance. And yeah, some people say, oh, well, we can't keep them for 32 weeks. Well, why not? I mean, if a golfer joins a golf team, joins a golf club, he's joining it for the season. That's what he's doing. Somebody joins a bowling league, they're joining it for the season. That's what they do. Guess what? They join a square dance club, they're joining it for the season. It's a season. These people who say that, oh, dancers don't want to dance for a whole year, they don't want to take a whole year to learn. Why not? That's what the activity is. I mean, they come out for the season. They're joining us. They join us for the season. It's a progressive teach, and that's the way we describe it to people. It's a progressive teach. You need to come as often as you can. If you have to miss a couple of weeks, you have to miss a couple of weeks, but you need to catch up. Yeah. And we make every effort to help them do that. I think if you're going to leave them out, if you're going to hang them out to dry by not helping them when they do come back, then they're not going to come back. That'll be an issue. But
one of the things that I've always noticed in Canada when I was there, and a couple of the callers I've talked to do this here in Australia as well, is they do what we were talking about earlier. They make themselves available. If you have missed a night or if you've missed a couple of weeks, make sure that you contact us when you come back, and we'll see what we can do to catch you up, either before, or sometimes it's even an extra visit down into the rumpus room or the basement, and you do what you can. What you're saying about missing 2 weeks, I have noted that this was a rather heated discussion that came up recently with a couple of other callers. They were talking about the SSD program versus the basic and mainstream program that lasts 32 weeks to teach the basic program. One of the advantages of having a longer program is that you don't cram 100 movements in, as you were saying, Jeff. One of the disadvantages of having a shorter program, such as the SSD is designed so you can bring in a new club every 12 weeks. You can start a new class, but you've got people that do have schedules. So as an example, if you're doing SSD and you miss lessons 7 and 8 because you had a cruise and then you had something on, so you missed those 2 weeks, you've missed circle to a line, separate, split two, wheel and deal, double pass through, first left, next right, the whole ocean wave family, single circle, Alamo styles, the balances, the trades, the swing throughs, and the cross runs. That's 2 nights of SSD program missing. And those are the foundations for everything that follows the rest of the night. So you have to cram those 2 nights in. That's a lot of material in one night from standard positions or 2 nights. But now you're going to, instead of saying, well, we've got a class starting in 32 weeks, or we've got a blast class starting in a month, we can catch you up there. Now you're saying, well, you started SSD, come on back and join the SSD in 12 weeks. We realize you're going to miss, those 2 weeks every couple of months, and you're always going to be restarting. So it's a balancing act. I think what you said, Jeff, is the meme that went with square dancing right at the beginning when I started. If you make it fun and you make it an activity they want to come to, it's not a matter of they don't have the time. They'll find the time, because people find time to go bowling. People find time to go to the movies. People find time to do what they want to do. They make excuses not to do something if they're kind of about doing it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's right. Most callers, I can teach 5-6 calls a night. I can teach them. The dancers can't absorb them. The dancers, they get overlogged. They hit a point where I just can't do this anymore. And, you find they leave early, and of course they've missed whatever. If your last tip or your last 2 tips are dance tips to review or to give them floor time on everything they've done, and they leave early, they don't get any practice time.
I still remember the collar wars of the 1980s, the early 1980s, where Collar Lab is saying, we're going to do basic and mainstream in 1 year, 86 hours of teaching on the floor, and you can do the full basic and the full mainstream program. And the war was split in Collar saying, this is way too fast. It's fast, but we can do it. I can do it. And the other half was, this is way too fast. You cannot possibly teach the basic program and the mainstream program in 1 year of calling. It just can't be done. It's not good for the dancers. That was the 1980s war. Now we're into the 2020s war of, you should be able to start a new class every 12 weeks.
Yeah, right.
So it's progress for the sake of progress, but it's also a difference. And I'm a personal believer, and as what Bob was saying earlier, if you make it fun and entertaining for the dancers, you're a good teacher, and you make them want to come, they're going to come.
They're going to come. That's right.
Excuse me. Jerry Story used to say he took 2 years to teach mainstream and basic, and then he would teach plus. But they had 2 years to learn mainstream and basic first, and doing it in all different positions.
Okay, so mainstream and basic has 67 calls, and now he's the one that created SSD at 50 calls and says it can be done in 12 weeks.
I need to clarify this. We had Jerry on talking about the SSD program and what it is and what it was not. It is a standard application, common use program of the SSD, which can be taught in 12 weeks as a destination. But he also clarified, if you want to use the rest of the positions, the non-standard applications, and the mainstream, the SSD program will take you 2 years to become a mainstream program. That's to get dancers on the floor. He never designed it to be a stepping stone. He was the very first one to clarify when we had this discussion that it's not designed to replace mainstream. If this is what you want to do, it's still going to take you 2 years to be a mainstream dancer. It's going to take you another year dancing SSD. So you've got your SSD, and then you've got your group that's going to dance SSD. You can bring in a new class and you can dance SSD and learn all the extended variations of the program as add-ons to the program. And so it's not 12 weeks, that's it, that's all you ever learn.
Right.
It was never designed that way.
No.
Kip Garvey is doing this locally, and phenomenal, the growth rate of his club. He started with nothing, and then all of a sudden he's got over 15 squares dancing at the club because he went through it. And when he got to the end, he ended it and started another one. And the thing is, the advantage of when you have a short program like that, the most eager people to bring in new dancers are newer dancers themselves. And after they've struggled through what we do give them now, it's taken them so long, they don't want to go back and help people with another class. But if you've only been doing it 12 weeks, another class can be just a ball. Like I said, it worked for me in the 90s. I didn't know about all these new terms. I just did that myself. I run a basic class, and then I started another basic class and started another one and another one. And I had the advantage of being able to do it on different nights. So when I started the next one, I leapfrogged the two things. So if somebody got a little bit, oh, this is too much, they switched nights, and it's a lot easier. And it was unreal. I was blessed with, I went from 4 squares to 430 members in the club by doing that.
One of the big things that you just said there is one of the things that led to the lack of dancers coming in was this massive rush to the higher levels. Callers would teach standard basic, or what a lot of people called plain vanilla simple, you know, swing through boys run Ferris wheel is one movement because that's the way it's called. And a lot of callers taught and used that in that particular case. And they got up to dancing the plus program very, very quickly. Dancers did not want to go back and repeat to bring in new dancers because they would have to redo everything that they've learned. Whereas new dancers that dance basic would happily bring in basic. New dancers that dance basic and mainstream would happily support a new dancer class. But once you get past that mainstream level, dancer recruitment drops off to almost nothing the higher you go. And that is my opinion, for what it's worth, which is absolutely nothing. But my opinion is that was one of the biggest things that led to the downfall of square dance recruiting, because we stopped making it fun because we put too much too fast, and we're still doing too much too fast.
But a lot of callers too are not putting in the necessary homework. The homework they're putting in is choreography, and that's not what the homework should be spent on. The time should be spent on. The time should be spent on building a program of longevity. That's what it should be. I mean, I'll go back a few years. As a full-time traveling caller, I did a lot of calling in the U.S., and one of the big issues down there was plus. Yes. There was soft plus, there was full plus, and there was plus APD. In those days, it was APD. It wasn't DBD. It was all positional dancing. All right, so we had APD. So when I got booked to call a plus dance, I would have to ask the question, well, what program is your club actually dancing? Are they doing soft plus? Are they doing full plus? Are they doing plus APD? And of course, you'd be talking to the president or somebody who's on the executive, and they wouldn't dare want to admit that they were a soft plus club. So you always were hired to call a plus ABD. And I'll tell you, as a traveling caller, you better have 3 programs in your case, because you're going to get it there, and they're not plus APD dancers. They're really not, but the guy didn't want to admit that because he probably dances somewhere else that is. And it became a real issue for traveling callers to go down there and call those programs, but it was just the way that callers were pushing dancers through without any regard, because they were told by their executive-run clubs, we need bodies up here. We need bodies. Just get us bodies. Teach them the list. Get them up here.
And I think I know the area you're talking about, and that the plus ABD club, APD clubs, or the full plus clubs are the plus program less spin chain the gears, less crossfire, less box the net, less do paso, less anything wrong way. And you that is your full plus program, but you never know what the lesses are until you get there and call it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there was some issues.
The floor is open, ladies and gentlemen. Does anybody have any questions, comments for Jeff? He is here. He's got his books available. He's got his wisdom and his knowledge and experience available. Like I said, he started calling at the age of 9 and has progressively got better over the years, and he still continues to do so, and he still encourages new callers and experienced callers to develop their skills, and opens up entire worlds by looking at things the old way, the new way, and differently. So pick his brain while he's here. Yes, John. John Jurgens.
So Jeff, how do you structure the fees for your classes? Do you have them do a one-time buy-in for the whole, the whole course? Do you have them do it nightly, or what works best for you?
Okay, you're talking about the dancers supporting the program. Okay, I have two
Dancers paying
executive.
the fees.
Yeah, I have two executive-run clubs that I work for, and they both are pay up front for the season by the third night of dancing. I have my own collar run clubs that I run as well, and those are all pay-as-you-play. My pay-as-you-play clubs are a little bit more expensive than the executive-run clubs. My halls cost me more than they're spending for their halls. But I find that by doing the pay-as-you-play, it works okay for me. I don't have an issue with that. And, honestly, the programs that I'm running, I have a few people who actually, they're retired and they travel. So they do tend to miss. But I find that, every now and again I'll go and there'll be extra money in the pot. And I found that they've paid for the nights that they missed, which is kind of cool. So I do both ways. We have our own round dance club, and that's a pay-as-you-play as well.
Yeah, one of the things that, sorry,
well,
John,
for
I
your
was just going to
class-
say
for your
one of the
class-
things that, sorry, go ahead. Go
For
ahead,
your
John.
for your classes, do you have better retention if they pay for the whole class up front?
Nope.
Rather than, you don't see a difference there?
No, we have, our retention is our retention, but we find that if people have something else to do on that night, if something else comes up, they miss. We've never really found that them putting out that whole chunk of money right up front is going to affect their full-time attendance. They try and be as regular as they can for sure. But I find that with my own pay-as-you-play clubs as well, that they don't miss a lot. Let's put it that way.
Yeah, one of the things that was common. Yeah, one of the things that was common in before I left Canada is executive-run clubs. Let's just take an average, just for the sake of calculation, understanding what I'm saying here. Let's just say your season ran 30 weeks, so they would have a pay-as-you-go $10 a person a night, or you'd have 200, so that's $300, or you could pay up front and pay $250 and get the discount. That works well if you've got an executive management. But one of the things that a lot of Canadian callers have been saying is, as opposed to going into the States where they still look at square dancing as $3 a person per night, a lot of the Canadians have recognized that there's a lot of work that goes into this. And when you have a donation without a fee, they actually got more money than they had if they said $5 donation at the door. If they said just a tipped our donations welcome, or donation for the evening dance without a fee, they were getting $10, $20 into the pot being dropped, and they were making more money. So that's starting to recognize that this activity actually takes a lot more than just $3 a night. It's not $19.50 anymore. And it's slowly coming around, but there's still a lot of people that are in that mindset. And the reality is most of that mindset is at the plus, advanced, and challenge level, where it's $3 a night is what I pay for dancing. Most new dancers realize if I'm going to get a DJ, I'm going to pay $800 a night for a DJ, or I'm going to get a collar because that's only $50 a night.
That's the mindset.
I'm confused, Mel. I get paid more by my advanced dancers than any club would dream of paying me.
Yeah, but you're an anomaly, Bob. In a lot of cases, how you do things and how you set that up, you probably get paid more by your advanced dancers in your area. But do you have a set fee, or do you just open it up?
I don't even, whatever they give me.
That's right. And that's exactly what I'm saying. In North Dakota, there used to be a drugstore called Wall Drug. It was basically the entire town. They had a restaurant there, and it was always making money, and they had a full menu, but there was no prices, and it was pay what you think the meal was worth. And they were making hand over fist almost 3 times what every other restaurant was making in town, because people were putting in, service was good, the food was good. Well, that's a mentality that square dancing needs to adopt for their callers. If your service is good, if your entertainment is good, if they want to be there, they're going to pay what they think it's worth. And I tell you, it's a lot more than what we charge for it or what we think it's worth.
I had a club once and it blew me away again. That I just set up the jar and they paid. They had a set amount. And like Jeff said, I went in there one night and saw a tip. 10 $100 bills. Somebody gave me $1,000 on one night to say thank you for what I did.
Yeah, but I bet you never wore that bikini thong to call again, did you?
Oh, that kid, that club became help me with the family at Christmas time. They bought bicycles for all our kids.
Yeah.
You know, it was wonderful. I had a great time calling for them.
It's been my experience in North America and also here in Australia that square dancers are very, very generous and very giving. You need a hand, they'll give you a hand, and they pay you what it's worth. I don't really set fees. I haven't had to set a fee for calling. Now, admittedly, I don't call for a club now because it's not in my area. I do about a dozen open party nights a year. I'm making more on these party nights than I usually do on a club night. But whenever I've been asked to go and call a dance somewhere, I haven't set fees because I have always, I might send $200 for the night and that includes travel expenses. I stopped doing that because they were paying me travel expenses, accommodation, everything else, plus the $200 a night. For me, that was all inclusive in my price. They're very, very generous and they understand what it costs and what it does. We as callers are part of the problem of locking dancers into that mindset. And we need to change that by changing our attitudes and give them something that they want.
There was a caller that approached me once that said, would you like to do this one night stand fill in for me? And I was charging $200 a night. And he told me there's a catch. You have to charge $400 or you'll never be booked by me again. Well, okay. I went up to his $400 and I started to get 4 times as many bookings.
It was, it's the same here. There was a youth group. They do what they call barn dances here in Australia, but there's a group that wanted to do a square dance at one of the halls. And they called me up and they apologized because they could only pay $800 for the evening. And they know that, DJs charge a lot more, but they had a very limited budget. I was going,
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, that'll be fine.
As a full-time caller, I do a lot of party dances because they understand the cost of entertainment. As you're saying, they're prepared to pay the bill. And DJs nowadays for a wedding, they charge between $1,000 and $1,200 for a DJ.
Yeah.
For what?
And
he doesn't even use a microphone half the time. Yeah. And I go in and do a wedding, and I don't pick bones about charging $750 for a wedding, and it's never queried, never.
I'm going to drop back to something you said earlier, Jeff.
Yeah.
On party nights, like these open dances, like the one that I just finished here.
Yeah.
You callers have to do their work. These are not the kind of gig that you want to do. If you're a brand new caller, you get up and you want to move the dancers around and you focus on your choreography. This is all about entertaining the audience, choosing your audience, interacting and building rapport. And it really has nothing to do with the choreography you use other than it has to work. It's not about the choreography. It's not about square dancing. It's about the fun. And chances are, if you give them that, they'll ask you back. You'll get a booking almost every year.
Yeah, I have a lot of repeat bookings. I lost 5 weddings last year. I do a lot of youth groups. The weddings were because of COVID. I do a lot of youth groups, and I have 3 youth camps that I do every summer. And you can't believe the number of weddings that have come out of those youth groups, out of those camps. And it's great. I mean, they just keep happening year after year after year. Now, unfortunately, we lost all 3 of those camps last summer because of COVID. I'm hoping that we might get at least one of them back this year, but we're still in lockdown, so hard to say.
It was the same thing. I was booked 5 years in advance, every year for 5 years for the Canadian Equestrian School. It
Yep.
was just outside of Ottawa. And I mean, that was about 200 kids. And every year it was a booking. It was their big event of the year.
Yeah. Yeah, I love doing those things. They're great.
Yeah.
And the youth camps are good because a lot of them are religious based, and therefore there's not a lot of sneaking out the back and having alcohol and smoking cigarettes and all the rest of that stuff. So they're good fun weekends or good fun events, and we have a good time with the kids. I have a whole program that I've designed for youth because I do a lot of work in schools as well, and of course the kids. Nowadays, there's all this, they can't touch, they can't do any of this stuff, so we don't teach swings, we don't teach any of that stuff because they're not allowed to do that. So, we build a program that will actually work in the school system quite comfortably, and everybody's happy with it. So,
You know that now that you've said that, you're going to have to provide a copy of it because everybody's going to want a copy of it.
Actually, it's not even written, it's just because they're all different. I'll tell you, grade fours are the hardest ones to work with, too.
Oh, yeah. I don't want to get cooties.
No, well, all the boys have to shake their shirts down over their hands, before they can touch. That's the only time they touch is when they circle left or circle right.
Yeah. The floor is open, ladies and gentlemen. If you have any questions for Jeff while he's here, by all means, throw it up. Or if you want to open it up to other topics, as I said, Jeff is one of those quintessential caller teacher instructors about teaching how to teach, as well as teaching in general. So if you want to pick his brain on what he's presented today or anything else, he's put his life on the line and ready to fall on the sword.
Jeff, do you offer family discounts for your classes?
Yes.
If so, what kind of a structure is it?
Well, to be honest, we don't have a lot of youth in our classes. Certainly in my color run, which are advanced plus and advanced clubs, but in our basic class, the one that we run through the one club that is a basic and mainstream together, that is run through the school system, and they pay up front. It's a seasonal price, and it's based on one or two people, and if there's children involved, then the price, I believe the kids are free at that point. If the parents sign up, the kids are free. I don't manage that part of it, so don't hold me to that, but I believe that's the way it's written in the school board system. And our other club, where we have a basic class, they let the kids in for half price. They do them for half price. That one I do know.
Absolutely. So I'm just right now, give me 1 second.
John's got his hand up.
Yes, John.
You're muted, John.
Okay, now I got it. All right. What age group do you start with at the start? 8, 9 years old, or do you wait till they get to 12 or 13?
Are you referring to what? Going into school?
The children. When they bring the children.
Yeah, when I go into schools, I won't do anything under grade 4, which I believe is 9 years old.
Say 10.
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, now I started at 7, so I guess I should be willing to take 7-year-olds, and my grandson wants to start, and he's 7, so I think I'll probably be teaching him, but I had the advantage of having a father who was a caller, so I've been around square dancing literally all my life. My dad called full-time for 40 years. And in those days, when he was a full-time caller, and he was a very well-known caller from Toronto who did a fair bit of traveling, he called to over 100 squares a week in 3 clubs. His one club was his largest club. There was 40 squares in that club. You could literally dance in that square for 6 weeks, or in that club for 6 weeks, and not dance in the same square for 6 weeks. There was that many people. Those are the good old days, right, Mel?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I have a little different take on that. When I taught
third and fourth graders for 10 years, 2 classes at a school. And it lasted for the whole year, once a week for the whole year. And I found that the third graders were always better dancers than the fourth graders.
Yeah.
Because at fourth grade, they start becoming aware.
Yeah, that's right. They start to develop their own opinions.
And they're more subject to peer pressure.
Yeah, I worked in a school 3 years ago where I had to do the entire school. I did from grade 4 to grade 8. We didn't do but we had all the classes, all the grade 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8 classes. And I got, over the course of the week, I got each class for 2 periods, and a period was 60 minutes. So I had each class for 2 hours.
Yeah.
And the first session of each class was really rather strained until the teacher informed the students that they had to do a showcase the following Monday in front of the school. And we did the showcase by grade. So I had 3 grade 4 classes. They danced first. So what we did for the showcase was just a singing call. But when we were dancing, when I had those kids, I had the grade 7 and 8s going through square throughs. I had them doing swing throughs. We were doing all kinds of stuff with them. And the grade 5s and the 6s were the biggest problem I had. 4s were great. 5s and 6s were horrible. 7s and 8s were terrific. And then finally the 5s and 6s, they decided to smarten up because they realized that they were going to be on show because the principal announced that they were inviting the parents to come and watch. And so I had to go back. I went back. I worked the whole week, Monday to Friday, every class. And then I went back on the Monday morning and we did a showcase. And we did it by grade. So the kids got up and they formed their squares and we did it by grade. And all we did with each of them was a singing call. So we did a singing call that kind of suited them. I did Disney, I did Beatles, I did Beach Boys. We did some tunes that would make the classes happy. But because there were only 2 7s and 2 8s, they did the 7s and 8s together, which was pretty cool. It worked out. So we did a 4, we did a 5, we did a 6, and we did a 7 8 together. So I did 4 singing calls, basically, was what it worked out to. And the parents came out. And the kids, it was really funny because as much as they horsed around in class, as soon as they had to do that showcase, they were perfect. They did their singing calls absolutely perfect. So we kind of need to be able to put those kids on show to have them smarten up a little bit and want to really actually participate. But it was fun.
Yeah. Part of our program was at the end of the year, they performed for the school for the entire school out in the yard. And you're right. When that performance was coming up, they got really sharp.
Yeah. Oh yeah. For sure.
Yeah. There was a good question that just came in the chat. I'm just going to throw this open because we do have a wide variety of people from all over, but it was, and you don't have to give this information if you don't want to, but what are your average current prices for lessons in different countries? If you feel like sharing, like what is the price where you live in Canada? What's the price where you call in Australia for your dancer classes, just to get a feeling. It'd be interesting to see who charges what and what the variations are. So if anybody wants to kick that off.
Oh, I'll kick ours off. All our pay-as-you-go clubs are $15 a couple, or $7.50 per person. Our schools, the 2 clubs that I work in with the schools, if you pay up front, the 2 executive-run clubs that I work for, they offer a pay up front. Well, you have to pay up front by the 3rd week for a specific price. If you don't pay up front, then you have to pay at the door. So their pay at the door is $8 a person. If you pay up front, it's $6.50 a person. So you end up saving. I mean, basically they say you can afford to you'll miss 3 nights and you break even if you pay up front.
Yeah, so basically you save about $120 a couple over the year.
Yeah, yeah. And those both are 30-week programs. Okay, so that's the way that works out. And our round dance club is the same, pay as you go. It's $7.50 a person.
I did forget to mention that, and sorry about that, Jeff. Both Jeff and Andrea, they do round dancing. I remember the Round Dance Association, teachers and cuers, as well as round dancing, as well as squares, and integrate rounds into a couple of their clubs. I'm not sure if you do it in all of your clubs, but I know you do in your plus.
No,
group.
actually, we only do it in two of them. Because we have a round dance club, that's where people prefer to do it rather than interjecting them into squares. But we do run a number of open dances that we do squares and rounds at as well. So
I just realized that I'd forgotten that part off of your bio.
that's all right.
Anybody else want to chip in on what they charge in their areas?
Quiet tonight. Jeez.
You're muted. You're muted, Roz.
My groups charge $10 a night per person.
And you're only a pay as you go, correct?
Yes, but they offer a slight discount if they pay for the whole month in advance, $5 off. And I think actually most people pay by the month.
Yeah. We had Roz and then Michael.
Sorry, I've got Penny here as well in the background, so she's making comments as well.
Hi, Penny.
Hi, Penny. Okay, with our group with learners, we did the first night free, but then we do 5 weeks for $10, which makes it $2 a night. But they only get that once, and basically that's to try and keep them in, get them hooked, and it's 5 continuous weeks. If they're off 6, we're lenient anyway. But that seems to have helped keep them in a little bit more. So and when you teaching, do you set, I believe you're setting a date that it's so many weeks and that's it. When we tried to do that before, because people miss weeks and struggle, it depends on your group, we actually stopped setting a date they actually graduate. We get really near the end and then set the date. So just depends on what the group does. So how do you go with that?
Jeff? You want to address that, Jeff?
What are we addressing? Can you?
She doesn't set a graduation. They charge $2 a night or $10 for the first 5 weeks, which is very, very, very low.
No kidding.
But they do not set a graduation date because of the variety of dancers coming in. They wait till they're most of the way through the sessions and then collectively set a graduation date for the club or for the group. Is that correct, Roz?
Yes, because you might get one group that really struggle and then you might get another group that's really perceptive and pick it up. So some can learn quicker.
What's your standard number of weeks? Do you have a set program time?
Ours is long. We're only a small club. We're a very small club. So we've only really got 1, maybe 2 sets. At the moment, we've got 3 learners that have just come in and we're trying the SSD, but we're doing SSD and mainstream in the same night. So you're not having a whole night of learners. So that does restrict and makes it time. So we just, as we go along and we get near the end, then we actually set a date that they finish. We don't preset it.
So you just teach until you've taught the list and then you decide if you're going to graduate them or not.
Yeah. Because when we've tried to set dates before, it puts you under too much pressure if they struggle or miss weeks to actually get there.
See, we have a 30 or 32 week teaching program. We no longer do graduations. We stopped graduations because what we discovered was a graduation is a finality. You graduate basic dancers, they say, great, I've done it. I don't have to come back now. I've graduated. I'm out of here.
Yep.
And that's what we found was happening, and that was really killing our retention. So we don't graduate them anymore. We just say, okay, we've learned all these calls. Now we're going to start learning some others. And we'll teach them something else, or we'll just dance. But we basically finished with the graduation thing because it was causing us more issues than what it was worth.
Okay. So it's just continual learning.
Just continue on. Yeah.
Yeah.
Come back and join us next season. As you know, when our season ends, and we're dictated because we dance in schools and we are not allowed to go past the end of May in our area. Anyways, they don't want us in there in June. So our season goes basically from the third week of September to the end of May, or the third week in May is what they actually work it out as. And then we're down for any Christmas holidays, we're down for any school holidays, March break, Christmas and all that, when we're normally dancing. And so when we're done, we're just done the season. You know, we tell everybody to come back next season. We start again in September.
Yep.
So how do you go, like if your dancers want to go to a national or some other function, because they have to be a minimum of mainstream or whatever when they go to those functions?
They have to know the calls. I mean, if people express a real desire to go to one of these events and we're not that far in the program, I mean, I have to tell them we're not that far in the program, but go, you'll learn lots. There'll be lots of workshops there you can join in on. I mean, if they have to know mainstream and they're only basic dancers, then we tell them you can't go. If there's no basic room, you can't go.
Yep.
I mean, as much as you want to support it, go as a spectator, see what it's all about. You might be able to jump into a square every now and again, but if they're not dancing the programs that are offered, then they clearly can't go. So
After I've got Michael and then Chris, but I want to come back to you for a second, Ross, because I got a follow-up question for you. So we'll go to Michael Braithwaite.
Yeah, hello. Our clubs around the area are mostly run by executive officers, and they usually charge around 120 up to 140 euro. It depends on whether they charge it as one sum or whether it's split up in two parts. Usually the first 3 nights, which are open houses or first class nights, are free. And then you have to make the decision to join the class, and then they usually pay. I'm not involved in the payment, that does the club, but that usually includes the graduation as well. And we go from beginning of October to the end of May, June, depending on the class, on the group. And it's a mainstream graduation what they do. And it's also included a little booklet with the definitions, with the calls, described in this case in German, right?
So that's roughly 30 weeks, including the Christmas shutdown that you would do at 140 euros. So that would be what? 182. That's roughly $200 US for 30 weeks, which is, you know, around that average.
Yeah.
30, yeah.
So your graduation,
750 a night.
Your graduation in June is mainstream. So you're doing basic and mainstream in 30 weeks?
Right. We're running through the program. Yeah. And that's pretty much standard over here in Germany. So we usually start in autumn, and we finish usually till the beginning of summer.
Yeah.
Okay.
Just out of curiosity, how long is your evening dance? Is it 2.5 to 3
depends. Some
hours?
of them are 2 hours, some of them are 3 hours. Some of the clubs have class and clubs beside each other on another day. Since I'm full-time and I run about and mainly call up to C2, it's a matter of time that I cannot spare for one club 2 evenings. So, and around the Munich area where you have about 40 clubs in a wider range, and where you have a lot of clubs on the same day, it's very important. Let me get it the other way. Also, with the lack of time for the people they want to devote to the activity, very seldom you find people going twice to the same club, supporting the class as an angel, which I think is necessary to build boundaries to the dancers. And especially if it's in an area where you can dance on 2 or 3 clubs on the same night, you need to have contact with your dancers you're running the class. Because if they dance on a Tuesday night for a class and then the club night should be on a Friday, it'd be tough for them to move to the Friday night. So they run class and club on one night and usually have it split up and with a mixture of club and class. So you have the angels right at the same night for the social boundaries.
Yeah, I want to just add a little bit of simple math for understanding, because when you look at that, if you're running the one night, just the one class teaching night, what you've got is the Color Lab teaching program, basic and mainstream, because you're doing it on that particular night, which is your 86 hours of the dance. That includes everything else, and it can be done. When you have a split program like you're doing, what you've got is the 64 hours. So it's just a little bit shorter than the Color Lab teaching program, but that's balanced off by the fact that you have both basic and mainstream, and the mainstream tends to help you out and you can get a little bit further along. It does force the teaching down within that. So, and the clarification I was asking, when you say 140 euros, is that per couple or per dancer?
That's per dancer.
Per dancer. So you're about $7.50 a night per dancer, or $7.50 US.
Probably
per,
around that.
Per dancer per night. And your program is roughly the same length as a lot of these clubs, and the same dancing learning time as a lot of these clubs that do an hour and a half basic, and then they do an hour and a half mainstream on their clubs, and they do that. So it's the same amount of time, but it's spread out over a different type of schedule.
That depends on the club. We have different systems. We had a 3-hour system where we had 1 hour class, 1 hour mixed, and the third hour for the mainstream dancers. We have 2.5 hour sessions where we run alternating class tip and club tip. In the first 10 weeks, it's a little bit tough for the club, but that is their tribute to the class to stay with the club, and which keeps them or makes them being wanted, right?
Yeah.
And therefore they support the class, and there's a little bit more time spent with the class than with the club, and that picks up the more calls they get, okay? And we're not into real fancy type stuff until they're done with the dancing and being graduated. So we go to the standard application, have it nicely flowing. We don't do every chess playing type thing within the class, which I think we want, as always said, wind in the face and entertainment and nice singing calls and flowing choreography. So they enjoy. That's the most important thing, and that the two groups grow together. It's very important for socializing, right?
The European model used to be. Sorry, go ahead.
I've seen it that big classes, they said, we don't get no support. Let's do our own thing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you in your
Sorry, go ahead,
your
Jeff.
time period, do you teach a standard app only, or do you do the variations? And you answered that. You said you just basically do standard applications while they're for the first year that they're in there, right?
Right.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah. The European model used to be, it takes a year to learn basic and mainstream. And that was on usually a 3 to 3.5 hour night program with a mixed group. But then it was, and that standard applications that, your left square throughs and everything else are all standard applications, none of the really weird DVD. But then it was a year to learn basic and mainstream, and then a year or a minimum of a year, preferably 2, to dance basic and mainstream to learn it before you would progress to plus. That used to be the model. I don't know if it still is, but it was a sound model. And it's really no different than what a lot of people say. They'll take 2 years to dance basic and mainstream, but they teach it inside out, upside down, and backwards. It's just a different approach to the same goal in the same time frame.
I've got one more point to add. One thing is I have a lot of dancers. They dance either plus or A or even some C dancers to me as well, but they also show up at the mainstream nights. And this, I think, is very positive. It's not that they go higher up and, they enjoy the dancing at the mainstream or with the class. And they also see it as their task to build up a foundation, help to build up the foundation. So they also get new dancers, well-trained dancers, which when they want to take a step up, right?
Yeah.
And have connection, but they also show up always at the mainstream dance.
Yeah, that's excellent. That's really good, because we have a lot of our challenge dancers will not dance below advanced. They think
Okay.
plus and mainstream is far below them. And it's funny, you know, because whenever we can get them onto a floor, I mean, I've taken C1 dancers and blown them apart with mainstream.
Yeah.
And mainstream by definition, they don't have a clue. And they should. They certainly should, but they don't.
Yeah, but that's not their fault. That's the caller's fault.
Well, yeah, but if they would dance the programs more often, I mean, if they didn't get their head in the air
Yeah,
and would actually go and dance the other programs, then they would become more
absolutely.
proficient at everything, right?
Yeah, one of the training models that is really popular, or was, I shouldn't say is because it's been a while, but from what I hear is part of the teaching of dancers in Europe, in Sweden, in Czechoslovakia, and from what Michael's saying in Germany as well, is they actually teach them what it means to be a dancer. It's not just about choreography, it's about the club, it's about the atmosphere,
Right.
it's about the welcoming. And the second aspect is most of the callers there devote a lot of time into all aspects of calling, such as being an entertainer, being a showman, and being somebody that can build rapport and build a club, as opposed to build fantastic choreography that nobody can dance.
Yeah.
And that is one of the reasons why it's attested, that because you can come down and have fun at every program level, whereas in a lot of places you can't do that. Chris Stacy. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Jeff. But then Chris Stacy.
I'm going to say honestly, in the last, I'm going to say in the last 10 or 12 years, that's where the square dance world has been, is build choreography that nobody can dance.
Yeah.
Rather than build a fun night. You know, it's the callers seem to go out and try and challenge each other when they're working, especially when they're working together. They try and challenge each other to see who can come up with the toughest stuff to stump the dancers. And I just don't get the point. I really don't. I mean, I've always taken this as I'm a paid entertainer, and that's what I'm here for. I'm not here to break the people down. I'm not here to make them fail. I'm here to make them succeed. And I think that's the message we need to get out to callers now, is that your job is to stand up there and let those people succeed in what it is they're accomplishing, what they're trying to do, rather than try and teach them all this weird and wonderful stuff that they'll never see again. And they're not going to be totally successful at. It's going to hurt, and I think that's what's hurt our numbers. I really do.
Absolutely, and that applies to every level and every program.
Yeah,
and every variation of every program. Chris Stacy, you had your hand up.
Oh, just when we were talking about prices, I had to actually go and look them up because I know what they pay me, but it depending on the club may or may not have that much to do with how much they're taking in from tuition. But anyway, one of the groups I did that I taught a lot of classes for and we were doing basically continuous cycles of classes in 16 or 32 weeks, depending on how you want to look at it, all year. And what they did for tuition there was they charged $30 at a time. $30 gets you 4 weeks, 4 lessons. And so and those were done in blocks of 16. So that's basically $120 tuition for a semester. And people would usually go 3 or 4 semesters to get up to plus. The other group was charging basically they like to go real fast, and they wanted people up to mainstream in 20 weeks, and they charged $90 for that. The other thing I looked up was what are people paying for social dancing at one of the local clubs here that was doing a variety of swing dancing, and this is mostly this group was mostly middle-aged people, not as many young people, and a very similar kind of club structure to the way square dancing is done. What they did for their beginners was their beginner course was, gosh, I think it was maybe 6 weeks, and on that one, they did not charge any extra for the lesson. Admission at the door for everybody is $11 a person, and then they would frequently have the beginner class, before the actual dancing started, and that was, I think it was 4 or 6, I forget, lessons, and those they didn't charge extra for the lesson, but then after that, when you move into the start taking the intermediate lessons, which most people would do, then they had an addition. I'm not sure how much it was, but an additional fee for the the first 45 minutes or 40 minutes or whatever it is before the dance starts, and then again $11 for the rest of the night, which is dancing. Anyway, those are just some numbers to throw out there for what they were doing.
So all of those fees that have been put out so far, other than what Roz is saying, average between $7.50 to $10 per person per an evening, depending on the evening. Your blast class, which is something that's the discount fee, your 20-week blast class, that works out to $4.50 a person per night. And that's a focus designed to get them with one purpose. This is people that are already dancing. So that's in addition to their regular fees. Chris, you're the highest at $11 per person per night, other than those that make donations. So between $7.50 to $10 a person per night is the average fee for a square dance, just on average. And when you think about that, it costs you to go 2 hours to go and sit in a movie theater, costs you $25. And if you want popcorn and a drink, that's going to cost you $75.
Yeah.
But so this is what I'm saying, and we're doing so much more work. I'm coming back to you in a second, Ross, because I have a follow-up question for you. But that is an average, and as I said, we do definitely undervalue what it is we do as a collective community. But that being said, if we want to increase the value of what we're worth, as Bob says, in his area, he's considered one of the best in his area at what he does. He doesn't put a fee down, he puts what it's paid, and he generally gets more because they value him more than he would value himself. And that's what we need to achieve across the board with square dancing. We need to be able to say we're worth more, but if we're going to say that, we have to be able to deliver what our value is. Roz, I had a question for you. You said you do the $10 for the lessons, which is $2 a lesson, which is fine. What are your regular your fees after those initial things per night? And the second part of that is you said you're doing SSD and you're doing your mainstream club on the same night. You asked a question, what do you do with your dancers when they can't go anywhere to graduate? I'm going to throw that back at you. You've got your SSD group. You're going to graduate them. What are you going to do with them? Because they can't come and dance in the mainstream group unless you're going to basically teach them mainstream. So
we do have to work that out. That is a problem that we've got to look at. And whether we just, as they're going along, finished SSD, just start adding on some mainstream to get them up to that standard, or whether we take a new SSD group.
So
it probably depends.
In essence, you're just using the
it's
SSD
something
as
we
a
do
recruiting.
have to work with.
Yeah. So in essence, you're just
Yes.
using SSD as a recruiting for the mainstream program.
Yes,
Okay.
yes, at the moment. And our normal fees are $8. And if you're a member, it's $7. And after the learners have paid their 5 weeks for $10, which is only a once only, then they're $4 a night.
Yeah. What's your membership fee to join the club?
The learners. So that sort of ties in with everyone else. Only $10 a year, not very much.
Okay.
And we're a non-profit organisation, so it's a bit different than callers making a living out of it. We're non-profit. Yeah. So we're not actually allowed to make a profit during the year. We're supposed to come out pretty even. Okay. So
I've got Jeff Seidel and then Bob Elling.
Yeah, 90% of our clubs, I think, in South Australia, they charge $8 per session. Sometimes we've had classes where we've charged less for learners, but at the moment, I am not running learners because of COVID, and but we're debating that at the moment. Question to the other Jeff, We had met. I don't know whether you remember me or not, but I called
Years
with
ago.
Jim Lee. Sorry?
Years ago.
Yeah, it was with Jim Lee.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's all I had to say, but good. Good
Okay.
session. Thanks.
Bob, you had a comment?
Yeah, basically, I'm with Jeff. I never liked graduations. I still don't. And he's right. It puts an end to it, and you always lose some people after the graduation. But I also want to comment, to me, one of the joys, and this is what comes back from the people who dance to me, is one of the most fun things about square dancing is learning something new. And like Jeff, it doesn't have to be something new every tip, but every night should have something that we've learned something new, something different, and people appreciate that. And with this, I lost the name of the program we're working on.
SSD?
A little brain mist. The SSD.
Yeah.
I don't think 10% of the callers really understand that what it is. When you get through with the SSD, you don't start teaching the mainstream. You know, from that's a level to go to. And there's more than enough variety in that you could call something, never repeat yourself all night long, and have the people having a good time.
Yeah.
And that is the key to it, is to not try to go right away into stepping up to mainstream. I'm not saying it's not wrong that if you have a couple calls you want to throw in there, you know, as long as they learn something in the night, they can hang their belt on it. You know, that was it. That was good. And that's the way I worked it when I had mine.
Yeah.
It was never progressive beyond basic when I had my great success.
It's a very valid comment. It's one of the misnomers and the miscommunications of the SSD program. A lot of people are looking at it as this is it, this is the be all, this is the end all, this is what we're going to do. Collar Lab and all the conventions are now going to have an SSD hall and basic's going to disappear. That's not what it was intended for. That's not what it is. SSD was never designed as a 12-week program and that's it. It was designed as a 12-week program to get you on the floor dancing, standard applications, pretty simple, wind in your face choreography, and then another year of dancing to get the extended applications. But while you're doing that, in another 12 weeks, you could bring a new group in, and another 12 weeks, you could bring a new group in. And after dancing around a year, and this is what Jerry Story would said when he wrote it, after dancing, learning SSD in 12 weeks, dancing it for a year, if you're ready to go on and learn mainstream, you can go somewhere and learn the rest of the mainstream groups and dance mainstream. It's not a mainstream program. It's not a filler program. I spoke at the beginning. I'm neither a proponent nor a naysayer of the SSD. I'm neither for it or against it. I see the merits and I also see the disadvantages of both, but the biggest disadvantage that I see is the lack of understanding of what it is. And this is why I spent so much time actually studying this program to see what it is and what it is not. And even in the session this morning with Mike Seastrom and Wade Driver on the program, there's still miscommunications and misunderstandings about what the SSD program is. People use it. Oh, I use the SSD, and a lot of them are doing exactly what you said, Roz. I'm restarting my group with the SSD program and I run it with the mainstream. Well, are you running an SSD program or are you just fast tracking the dancers and then they've got to dance a year to get the rest of the extended applications and learn the mainstream and all of this kind of stuff? Are you graduating SSD? Where do they go from there? Because they cannot go to any basic dance because they don't dance a basic program. They can't go to any mainstream dance because they don't dance a mainstream program. Do they have an SSD dance or do you teach them that? And if you are, you're just teaching the mainstream program. You're just doing it in different order.
Wait a minute there. You're wrong, Mel. The difference between basic and mainstream, as you explained earlier, I mean, basic and SSD is walk around the corner, seesaw your partner, and a do paso.
Right. And
And the do paso probably isn't going to get called at a mainstream dance or a basic dance anyway. So you have walk around the corner and seesaw. That's the only difference.
Yeah, well, this is what I'm saying, Bob. In your area, yes, you could quite well be right. I have not been to a basic dance here in Australia that was advertised as basic, where I have not heard walk around your corner, seesaw, or do paso ending in a courtesy turn into something else, or do paso ending into an Alaman dar, which takes us into the dar family, which is also not on the SSD program. And
I've never seen a basic dance in my entire life.
Oh, well, now and go to Europe. Helen, are you still with us? Hannah, you're with us. You guys do a lot of basic dances over there still, do you not?
Yes, we do. And we also cut them in half. So we can do a dance on level 34 or 40, depending how far the group is gone. And we organize dances for those students.
Yeah. And
out here during the teaching season, there's that point where they finish the basics. So they advertise basic dance for about a month or so. They put on open dances that are basic level. And
that is really good. That is really good that some groups are doing that, but it's not common everywhere. But it just goes to show you, I know in Canada, I think they used to, and they probably still, I haven't lived in Canada in 15 years, but there's almost always a basic hall at every convention.
Yep.
Yes. And the callers rotate through that. It's not just a dumping ground for new callers, and It's not just a dumping ground. At one point, it was getting that way, and then some very wise callers stepped in and said, "You guys are bloody idiots. If you want to do this, I'm not going to call here anymore." And they suddenly realized that, yeah, we've got to have quality at every level. And what happens is, are they going to put an SSD program? Because most places, I know in Canada, do paso and the Alaman dars are synonymous. They're not used all the time together, but they're used, as is wrong way dars, and they're used at the basic programs. And they're those, as you say, Bob, the one or two movements that you do in that tip or the evening that you can play with. You may not see it again, but it's done there. Yeah. And it's called there because it's part of the program. So your SSD dancers can't do that. Dixie style to a wave, boys trade left swing through, very common sequence. You can't, if you dance SSD, well, you can't go dance that in the mainstream because you're almost inevitably going to see that in a mainstream hall or a spin the top. So what did the
Dixie
SSD
style
dancers?
and swing through? Don't do the boys trade. I do Dixie style and swing through. It's a normal right-handed swing through.
Yeah.
And then you have the girls cross run. You're back into a right-handed ocean wave.
Yeah.
Everything is neat and smooth, but you can't do that with SSD. It'll fall apart.
And so these are the issues. And as I said, SSD is still in its infancy. I totally abhor the fact that it says an alternate entry into a final destination, or an alternate entry into square dancing to a final destination. I don't even know why they put the alternate entry. It is a destination program. That's it. If we're going to do that, let's use it for what it's designed.
I think they must have put that in because of all the confusion, and it's natural confusion because for decades and decades, Caller Lab has come out with all different, bootstrap fast track type programs of all different kinds. And so along comes this, and it's easy to understand why most of the clubs and the callers are like, oh, it's the latest one of those. So
I agree. The adding of the word destination is absolute, and I think it was great. I think the part that they should have taken out was an alternate entry into square dancing to a destination. It is a square dance program, standalone.
Yeah, I think they put that alternate entry thing in there as, I think you're right.
Pacifier.
It really muddies the waters.
Yeah. Roz, you've had your hand up, and I'll come back to you, Bob.
Before SSD, when we were doing teaching, we used to do learners for the first hour, and then we'd do an intermediate class. Like when we were teaching, usually when we got almost through basics, you'd find the difference of the ones that were perceptive, ones that were struggling, and ones that were mediocre. So that's when we actually brought in new learners and we got the ones that were struggling to repeat. So I would say we'd probably do the same with SSD.
The problem that I see with that.
So once SSD is at the end of the program, we'll probably do, we'd probably have maybe taking learners. We may just consolidate SSD for a while and then bring in learners because we're only a country group. So we can't send them to another club or anything like that. And we really don't want to do another night. So I would say once they're finished, we'll just consolidate and then we'll bring in a new SSD group and then have the SSD graduates, intermediate or
I know how you feel, Roz. The nearest square dance club to me is
one
249
SSD,
kilometers
one
away.
mainstream for the rest of the night. Exactly. Yeah. Ours is a 3-hour round trip to dance with Jeff for the other. So we can't expect our dancers to do that.
So Jeff, if you want to address that, then Bob, then Chris. Sorry, we're getting lag in here. Jeff, you can address that, then Bob, then Chris.
Okay. The one issue I see with that, Roz, is that what you're going to do is do the SSD program for 12 weeks with those learners. And there's not going to be a foundation there. You're going to put them into your mainstream club at that point, and there's no foundation. They're not going to have a good grasp of the calls that they should know, and they won't know them. I mean, they're not going to be solid because they haven't had the time to be able to learn the calls properly. And what that is going to do is bring down your mainstream club quality. I mean, that has to be the result because you're not putting solid dancers into that club.
Can I just comment on that?
Yeah.
At the moment with our SSD, we're actually doing 2 learner brackets. And then for the rest of the night, it's SSD mainstream for the rest of the night at the moment.
Okay.
So that the SSD people don't feel out of it, that they're being just forgotten about. So they're already integrating. And once they've learned SSD, they don't just jump into mainstream. We continue that, we consolidate them. And then if you want to bring in a new SSD group, you bring in the new one, and then you do SSD mainstream, SSD mainstream. And then maybe after that, you may, if they want to go on to mainstream, we can either do it a little bit privately in our own homes, or you can change it and just have SSD for the first hour and do the mainstream and the learner mainstream.
Yeah. Okay.
So we're not jumping them straight into mainstream. We have to do consolidation.
But there's still
I don't let them go
foundation.
anywhere until they have. Yeah, they've got to have their basics. They've got to understand things before they jump up.
Yeah.
Yeah. Mark Hart is
And
noted
if they're
in
struggling, we actually recommend them to repeat the learners. That's what we did with basic and mainstream. I actually had to speak to them and say, look, I'm sorry, we can't put you up to the intermediate. We'll take you back down to mainstream.
Yeah. Mark has noted in here that if a caller only called
learners
called the
to relearn and make you stronger.
Sorry, Roz, I keep jumping in on you because you keep locking up. I thought you were finished.
No, go for it.
Mark.
I was.
Mark noted that if a caller only called the SSD for 4 or 5 dances in a row, chances are the dancers would never notice the difference. And you're absolutely correct on that, unless you're doing one of those programs. I had Bob Elling and then Chris Stacy and Scotty. I've just been told that you had your hand up. I'm sorry, I did miss that completely. So we're going to go Bob, Chris, and then Scotty. Bob?
Okay, a couple of things. Number one, having the SSD dancers alternating tips with mainstream dancers is in fact showing them that they're not quite there yet. You know, and the other thing I was going to say, SSD as a destination level, was many of us around the country have been screaming at the top of our lungs that the system they have now is not working. We're seeing the square dancing die virtually, seeing all the clubs. There used to be 150 clubs in our area. Now there's only 20. You know, it's because it didn't work. Now, is SSD perfect? No, but it addresses the issue pulling back and say, we're going to go to this level and that's it for a while. Now it's being embraced. Southern California, that's a very large area with lots of clubs. The associations are saying, we're doing SSD from this point on. We're going to give it a shot. But we all have to cooperate to make it work. That means that they're going to have the sustained SSD dances. And I know that Ken Bauer, for one, has been booked and he's told that he will be calling an SSD level dance. That's what they want. The associations are trying to make this work. Is it the perfect solution? No. Is it an improvement over what we've had? Yes, by far.
And I would like to add on to that, Bob, that an SSD level dance, chances are 90% of the floor will not even recognize that that's not a mainstream dance.
That's correct.
I noted when we were preparing with Jerry's presentation here on SSD, Dixie style, cloverleaf, turn through and spin chain through, Dixie style, cloverleaf, and 8-chain 4. That's it.
Yeah.
And
I'd like to see.
Doesn't have walk and dodge either, does it?
And walk and dodge, yeah. But those are the ones that were usually, most of the time, those are the only movements was spin the top, walk and dodge, and cloverleaf were the only 3 that were ever called that weren't on the SSD program. A lot of times spin chain through wasn't even used. The 8 chains weren't used in the pattern, only in the singing calls. It was just this kind of stuff that was going on. There's not a lot of difference in it, but the difference that I found, and most callers have found, is if a caller knows how to do his job, you could say the dance at the National is going to be SSD 8, and you'll have a fantastic time. Or you can say it's going to be plus, and you can have a crap time because the caller can only do what is written down by somebody that he's downloaded off the website. So that's where it goes down to. Chris, you had your hand up.
I yield the floor to my colleague, Scotty.
Scotty, sorry, I missed you completely there earlier. I didn't even see you waving.
Okay. Couple of little comments there on the different levels. Now, it's been a while since I was in the US to one of their national conventions, I admit that. But when I was there, I noticed that they had different halls for different levels of dancing. And so pretty much your basic dances were covered, your mainstream dances were covered, your plus dances were covered. What I have noticed here in Australia is that especially our state convention and any society dance, they've stated mainstream is the minimum entry level. And I sort of disagree with that. And we have last year changed that. We have put in basic tips in amongst it. And I was hounded fairly severely for doing it. But what I did notice that every time we had a basic tip, the floor was packed. All the mainstreamers were up. Everybody was there. I think what we may have to look at is down the line is having separate tips that are set up for the SSD. But we need to try and accommodate all, what I'm getting at is we need to accommodate all dancers if we can. I do follow what Roz is doing. I do like the teaching order of SSD. I think it is a more progressive and flowing method of teaching. And I see where Ross is coming from. Yes, right now, as it stands, especially in South Australia, her dancers must be mainstream before they can attend a convention, which, as I said, we're changing. So I sort of support some of what Roz is saying, but I see that, and I do understand that SSD is a standalone program, but it can also be made to a stepping stone to the end destination. So yeah, that's just a couple of comments that I've got. I'm off my rant.
Well, like I said, it's mostly SSD and basic are the teaching order is the big difference. You know, basic call, we walk around the corner, seesaw and do paso is not being used. And we could live without that. And I really love walk around the corner and seesaw, and I use it because it's a perfect combination. I learned about the figure eight. If you can create the flowing move of a figure eight, that is a perfect dance move. It's balanced right and left. And that's why I love using it. And it's so easy to teach. It's laughable, you know, that people can't do it or struggle with it. I don't know how Jeff teaches walk around and seesaw, but I say face the corner. First, turn the corner by the right arm, then turn the partner by the left arm. Let's do that again. Now let's do it without arms. And they've got the flow. And the whole thing is teach them in a body flow. And it takes less than a minute to teach it, and they can have it forever. But I'm willing to give that up because they dropped it. But we're looking at SSD and basic. And I hate to use the word, but basically they're the same program when you get to the completion. There is so little difference between the two. That's my impression. What do you say, Jeff?
So why do you think that SSD is going to solve the problem then if it's the same?
Because
that's what I don't get. This program has been around for over 15 years. It started as the Call 50. It started actually with the ACA, who wanted to change square dancing to one floor. That's what they called it. The first attempt at this was called One Floor, and that was by the American Callers Association, not Caller Lab. And it got buried, and then somebody else tried to resurrect it, and it's had so many different names that it doesn't make any difference. If you're saying that the teaching order is the difference, use my program because the teaching order is yours. Once you teach the core calls, you can teach in any order you like, in any program.
Yeah,
and so
I see that.
I don't see where this is going to see. What I'm hearing, and all the discussions that were held over Caller Lab in the last 2.5 months on emails, most of the callers that can't make the basic and mainstream programs work were Americans. It's working everywhere else in the world.
I have no problem with that, but I live in America, and America is what I got to fix.
Well, I understand but maybe you should work on the program that's there and try and fix it that way. That's all.
I can add a qualification. It's not just in America. The problem, though, is not just America. The problem is with the callers and what you said. We can't make the basic and mainstream work, and that is a caller issue, and that's a caller performance ability issue, a caller entertainment issue, a caller everything else that goes into being a caller, because we lost sight of what it was to be a caller for too long.
That's right.
And as you said, the Club 50, the One Floor, the SSD, the non-program, the Community 50, and the 7 other names that this program has had, it has evolved. There has been variations where you had a 50 movement program, but it dropped a lot of things, but Load the Boat, Relay the Deucey, and Coordinate were on that program of a 50 move, One Floor program. It has evolved, it has gone, it's standardized. I asked Jerry why Spin the Top wasn't on the program. He said, well, because in my area, we had to make the choice of something. We don't use a lot of Spin the Tops, and because I was the one asked to write it, that was my decision. That's the only reason. It was arbitrary, but I didn't disagree. In fact, I applaud his courage in doing that, and he was very open about saying it. He says, somebody had to make this decision. It's out there. He said he doesn't know if it's the answer. It is an answer. It is a direction. It may not be the final fix, but it is something that people are trying out new. As I said, I'm not for it. I'm not against it. I want to understand it, but to understand it, it's got to be used for what it's designed, not for what we're trying to morph this into, which is a fast track. And that's the unfortunate thing with it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
you're right. That's the unfortunate thing with it.
I'm trying very hard to make the program work. I'm in Mel's boat, but I want it to work because it'll work better than what we have now, is what I really believe. And I wished I'd known you earlier. I would have had you trying to help us write the manual, because I'm in the process of putting out a manual that tells them how to teach the program. And it's going to be a free gift from Riverboat. Anybody can have it. And I'm not looking to make anything on it. And we're going to provide singing call figures that'll work with everything, and examples of callers calling those singing calls, so that the newer caller can learn how to do this. I think the ones that'll benefit most will be the newer callers. Experienced callers aren't going to give up the calls that they know how to call on the average part, or the vast majority. They have their favorite calls, and whatever level that's in, that's the level they want to support. That's life.
Yeah, Jeff, just to clarify, what Bob is doing with Riverboat is very much what you have on your website with your teaching books and your module books for the programs. Another blatant product plug here, by the way. Those books are all available on the Canadian College website, College website. But what he's doing is essentially what you have, but it's specifically geared at the SSD level.
Right.
And included in that program are, Bob, in case you didn't know, Bob owns Riverboat Records and several other labels. The record labels are geared, the records and the music are geared so you could have SSD 11 and you'd have bracket, I'm only using that as an example, SSD 11 with the bracket half tag, because that's the movement. So it's the SSD program with the SSD 11 movement half tag on it. And you'll have a program of examples and choreography that support that whole program that go through for development for the thing. And as Bob said, and I think he said it very succinctly, whether or not it's the be all end all, don't know. But if we're going to make it work, we've got to give it a chance to be what it is supposed to be, rather than what we all want it to be individually. Yeah. And the only way to do that is to actually research it, take it by what it is, and use it exactly for what it is. Let's use it as a hammer if it's a hammer. Let's not use it as a saw and beat the heck out of the wood with it.
Yeah, okay.
For that, we already have a saw.
Yeah.
For those of you, I know it's a product plug, but if you are interested in the books that Jeff was talking about, go to the Canadian Callers webpage. Canadian Callers College. You can just Google that. It will open up the web page, and there's a whole bunch of links. There's products. There's links to the 4 books that Jeff mentioned, as well as other stuff. And if you're interested, if you're interested in the Riverboat side of the whole Bob was talking about, as well as the program when it's finished developed, you can go to the Riverboat Record side, or just send Bob an email, and Bob is more than willing to give you whatever information he has. At least.
And if anybody wants to critique it or have input, just send me an email and I'll send you. We've got the first night done.
Okay,
and we're working on more. As far as
Hannah with her hand up, and then I got Chris with his hand up. Hannah, you had your hand up earlier. I got booted out, so I didn't get to respond to you.
Hi, Hannah.
Hi. Well, it was a long time ago, but I would like to reconnect to the teaching part of Jeff's talk, and I just wonder, how do you do with a group that is very uneven, when some people learn very quickly and some people learn extremely slowly?
A lot of patience.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, really, you work with the ones who are slower. I flat out refuse to let the hot shots determine the speed. I have a teaching process, and my process will move on. I don't let those that are really moving along quickly, I don't give them any extra. I try my best to entertain them so that they still stay interested. But the ones that are slower, we try and work with them extra. Generally, if we have the opportunity to put them into squares with the ones who are doing better, then they will usually come along a little bit quicker. So we try and mix them up. In some of our clubs, we use the number system. I don't know if you're familiar with the number system or not, but we do use the number system in some of our clubs, not all of them. In one of my clubs, the club president and vice president actually will move people around in squares. They will take somebody out of, if they see that we've got 3 couples in one square that are all struggling, then they will go and physically move those people into another square with people who are not struggling. So that's what they do, and that's how we handle that particular situation.
And some dancers appreciate it. Other dancers take massive offense to that.
Yep,
You have
some
to
of them
know your target audience.
Yeah, it's true.
Chris Stacy, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I guess a couple of comments. I mean, I voted yes on the SSD resolution, not because I think it's exactly the right answer, but I'm in favor of trying things, and so here's the thing to try. So I think that's a good idea. It remains to be seen if people will actually do with it what it's what it was intended for and how all that'll play out. I think there's going to be a lot of variation. The one thing is that I guess there is an issue for some callers of not being confident that they can come up with nice choreography and entertaining choreography for people on the level. So it's a great thing that Bob and everybody's doing to get them some material. But the issue where I am, most of all the clubs that I call for are clubs that are not caller run, right? I'm just a hired help. And I mean, they tell me what they want done. I tell them if it's going to be possible. And then I also tell them, and we're going to do it my way. But in terms of their objective, I mean, if I'm going to, consent to work for them at all, because I think it's a reasonable objective, then they're the ones who set that. And all the clubs in all the areas that I call for, none of them are interested in SSD. They're just not really gonna have anything to do with it. So it's not, to me, it's not a caller issue where the caller doesn't want to do SSD and the caller has his favorite calls. I mean, I call I'll call everything from, party nights that I love doing, all the way up to the super high challenge levels. And so, I mean, I can use whatever, and I go to clubs all the time where they, you travel and you walk in the door and they say, oh, our beginners are here tonight. Here's the list of stuff they know. No problem. That's not the issue for me. But the issue is that the clubs not wanting, to really have anything to do with it. So I think that's the that's the main impediment that I see. It's got to be new clubs.
What we have to do is see success somewhere. If Southern California pulls it off and it starts improving the dancing population down there, then other people will want to copy it. It started off up here with Kip Garvey. He was isolated out in the hills, out in the boondocks. There's no population there, and he has this great success. And so people down here in the city, the San Francisco Bay Area, are saying, "Wow, that works so well. Why don't we try it?" And maybe if we can get not just a single caller, because a single caller could just be a great teacher and he could call any program he wants, and it'll work. Okay. Yeah. Because he has that teaching quality. But for the average caller, if it comes down and it works, then it's going to expand. If it doesn't work, Chris, it's going to go away.
Well, where I am, there's no mainstream clubs. Everything is plus, and there's just absolutely no way that they're going to give up their huge investment and all the years that they've
Sure.
spent learning all these calls, and then
Yep.
you come in one day and say, yeah, you know, half of what you know, we're not doing that anymore.
So how
That's
many
right.
clubs are there now versus there were 5 years ago? And how many dancers are there in the area versus what it was? If they're maintaining their dancing population, fine. Don't stop something that works.
No, they're not. No, they're dying like everybody else. But I'm just saying they're going to go
Okay.
down in flames.
Yeah, the issue that you have is a very common one, Chris, and what you're saying as well, Bob. Right now, most of our plus clubs and our advanced clubs are dying, not because of poor dancer retention, basically because we're physically dying. We're getting too old to dance and we're too set in our ways to change. We don't go out and recruit dancers, and that recruiting base is no longer there, hence the decline of square dancing. When we look at what is actually going on with that, yes, we did need something to invigorate. I've always said, and a lot of people have said it, the people that bring in new dancers are your new dancers from the last lesson. That is your biggest recruiting base. If you've given them a good time, they'll bring somebody in. Very few dancers recruit below the mainstream level. If they dance higher than mainstream, chances are they're not recruiting if they don't dance those programs. And I said that, I think you might have been in that meeting in the Ontario Federation meeting when I gave everybody, all of the clubs were there and they were all represented. And I gave them the absolute fix to fix dancer retention. I had everybody in the room stand up, and there was all club executives. It was all clubs. And I said, now you're off your fat asses. Each one of you go bring in two couples each, and you'll have the recruiting problem solved. Because there was only about 8 clubs that were actually dancing basic and mainstream, and they were recruiting, but none of the other clubs were. This is a major, major problem. Is SSD the answer? I do not know. SSD is an answer, but I think Michael said it. KIPP is having great success in the boondocks out in that area of the US. And in the US, this is a big problem. There are more callers around the world than there are callers in the US collectively. And most of the callers around the world are not using the SSD program as yet. A lot of them are embracing it, which I think is great. It's good to try new things. But when you look at a group, welcome back, Michael. I think you said there was, at least when I was in Germany, there was about 53 different square dance clubs just around Munich alone. Right. That's one city. And that was basic, mainstream, +1, and I think there was 2+2 clubs as well. But that's all there was. There wasn't advanced and challenge that, but there was 53 clubs. And I think the smallest club had something like 8 squares. They visited everywhere all the time. That was normal. They would not switch to SSD because their program works. They would fight SSD because there's so much there to compete with now. And this is right across different areas. Toronto used to be the same. I don't know what it's like now, but they had something like 27 clubs in the immediate Toronto and district area back in the early 80s.
Not anymore.
Yeah, and most of that has gone up to plus and advanced. If they don't change their mindset, well, they're dancing for themselves. The callers are calling for themselves. And quite frankly, I'm going to be very unpolitically correct. If that's what they're doing, good riddance. Because any caller that's calling for themselves is not calling for the square dancers. They're being selfish about it.
The biggest problem with Toronto right now, Mel, is that we have no callers.
Yeah.
Like they have no clubs because there's no callers. The callers have all I hate to say it,
died.
They've all died. Yeah. And because of that, there was no one there to take their place. And because of that, there are no clubs.
Yeah. Now, I look at that, and that's a very common story, but I look at that, as much as I hate to say it, in a purely mercenary point of view. That is a fantastic opportunity for experienced callers to start groups, to teach new callers how to call from fundamental foundation first, and re-kick this activity. And it would probably go a lot better than the SSD. I know I have a biased opinion. Or they could use the SSD program, and that would be the one that kickstarts it, and they reinvigorate a whole activity. And now you've got an SSD core, and you can start a mainstream clubs and go that way. That's what it's designed to be. But that's the utopian dream world that doesn't exist because of caller egos.
I hope that people really will try to use the SSD program and as a destination level. Personally, the only real problem I have with SSD is I just don't think it's radical enough. But there you go.
I agree with you, Chris. I hope people
do too.
I hope they do embrace it, and I hope they do use it for what it's designed for, and not what people are looking at it is just a quick way to recruit dancers into their clubs to fill the coffers up so we can keep dancing plus until I'm too old or until I die. And that's what we're going at.
That's what's most likely going to happen with it because it's been presented incorrectly as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah. I think Jerry must have spent probably half of the last year or two, and in a lot of Zoom sessions, not explaining the SSD program, but explaining what it was not intended to be.
Yeah. And unfortunately, nobody was listening because it's been accepted as something that it's not intended to be.
Yeah.
And
a fast track entry.
Yeah. That's an issue.
That goes,
I mean, I have a program that I've been doing I've been running Zoom dances. I mean, I'm a full-time caller. When they closed all my facilities, I had to do something. So I'm calling Zoom dances, and I have 3 Zoom dances a week. I've created a program called a relaxed 30 call program, and it's 30 calls. My 30 calls. I pick 20 basics or 26 basics and 4 mainstream calls. They're all 2-couple calls because that's all we're doing on Zoom is 2-couple dancing. Am I going to try and sell that to anybody? No, it's just a program that I've got because people aren't comfortable with the plus calls, yet they're plus dancers, but they want to keep dancing.
Yes.
And, they want to stay with the activity, and I want to keep them in the activity. I mean, my objective of all of these Zoom dances, and I tell them, we want you to keep square dancing on your calendar once a week so that when we finally get back to dancing, square dancing is on your calendar once a week, and you're going to come back to the club. And, we've got many of our dancers. In fact, our round dance club is almost twice the size of what our physical club was, which really surprises me, but it is.
That's
cool.
the Zoom, the Zoom round dance club.
But
you're talking your round dancing on Zoom is twice the size of your physical round dance club.
Correct.
Yeah.
Isn't that what I said?
You just said your round dance club is
did I say it the other way around?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. No. Our Zoom club is almost twice the size of our physical dance club as far as numbers go. All right. Now, my relaxed 30 call program, we're dancing 60 to 70 people a night, which is really cool. And it's 30 calls, and it's all standard. There's nothing fancy about it, but they're entertained. They come out for an hour each week, and they have fun with it, and that's what it's all about. My plus people, I have a plus dance on Tuesday nights. They come out, it's plus. Now, I don't do a lot of positional stuff because most of them are dancing by themselves, and they have enough trouble just trying to figure out where they're supposed to be. And the same thing with my advanced group. Now, for the summer, for July and August, we're going to run a plus DBD on Wednesday afternoons. It's going to replace the advanced group, and hopefully by that time we'll be able to lock down, and they'll be able to get 2 couples together. So we'll be able to play with that pretty good. But the program, the program is the program. It's just calls, and I don't see where, unless people are willing to make a lot of changes and callers are prepared to work with SSD and not just use it as a 12-week no base fast track to get people into their club, then it has to fail. It will fail if that's what it gets used for, and that's unfortunate.
Well,
my thoughts.
Oh no, absolutely. Ladies and gentlemen, it is now 12 o'clock. My time, which we've been on for 3 hours. By all means, the room is still open. I just want to say that this is the last scheduled session that I have. We still have sessions every Sunday. I'm still waiting for an exact date on my surgery, which is why I haven't booked ahead. But on Facebook, or for those of you that received the email invitation, I've taken on board the topics that you've asked for. I've been talking with Dave Prescott. Guido's going to be coming back to talk about real hexagons. Gerhardt's going to be coming to talk about colorama and use in both hexagons and rectangles. Ed Foot's going to be coming to join us on site resolution basics. He does a blurb on the Dixie Grand getouts and the value of just that movement centers trade. A lot of other things. We're going to go back and relook at some of the basics. Fazar, we're hoping to have you back, Jeff, again, and a number of other callers, and building in to the programs. But we will have a finalized calendar or a precept of a calendar out. So pay attention on Facebook in the newbie callers, or in callers in training, or in Square Dance callers, or on the emails for the invitations. If you want to be added to the email list, send me an email and I'll put you on the distribution list. So Jeff, I want to say thank you very, very much for coming in and
Oh, my
throwing
pleasure.
your life and your neck on the chopping block to answer any question available. I knew Jeff would do that. I've known Jeff for a fair long time, and I've had the pleasure of working with him on several occasions. So
I even got you calling advanced.
yeah, I was just about to say it. Jeff was the one that gave me the advice. I was talking to him about calling. He says, well, you should really get out and learn to call advanced. I says, I have no interest in the advanced program. I says, yeah, but we have interest in you as a caller, and they're not going to hire you unless you call A1, because that was a thing. You had to be able to call in all the programs. So he's the one that started me calling, got me interested in calling the advanced program for no other reason than I needed to get the bookings.
There you go.
Mel,
and
one more time. Are we going to be here next week? Are you here next week?
Yes, unless I'm in the hospital getting my spinal cord reattached or something like that. We will have a session next week. I just haven't got one scheduled as yet because my surgery was supposed to be imminent, but now they've given me a tentative mid-June to late June as a possibility. So right now it's a ad hoc schedule. It's not a fixed schedule like I usually publish. But there are a lot of topics on the list. One of them that's been asked for a number of times is caller judgment. That's assessing the floor and making those judgments. We've had a few presentations on that, but
yeah, I thought we did caller judgment every week. That's where we all sit around and Zoom and that guy over there.
Pretty much, but I also know that Jeff has a very well received presentation on caller judgment, judging the floor and making those adaptations. So I'm going to probably ask him to come back and kick that off as a topic.
Sounds good.
Later on. Jeff, I did get a request. If you are interested, I'll send you an email about the presentation you had today and a couple of others. So I'll send you that as an email rather than tie it up here.
Yep.
But thank you very much for giving your time.
My pleasure. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it. I'm going to say good night to all. And
give my best regards to the boss. Give my best regards to the boss and tell her I did notice that there's no cobwebs on the treadmill, but I know it's her and not you.
Yeah, right. Okay. That's actually true. Take care, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
And as I said,
bye.
The floor is open. We'll catch you later, Bob.
Bye, Bob.
Bye.
And Linda, you've asked a couple questions in there, and yet you're always more than welcome. You know that.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
We do periodically from time to time get a lot of dancers that just tune in for the sake of wanting to learn. Linda, are you still interested in learning to call and calling, or are you just tuning in as a dancer?
I'm tuning in as a dancer at this point, but this is very interesting to me and I really enjoyed it, especially the teaching aspect because I have a teacher background.
Mm-hmm. So by all means, we do get a lot of dancers that just want to tune in. As I said, the sessions are open. They are free. We do them every Sunday at the same time. It's a fixed link. So if you want to tune in, or you know others that want to tune in or interested, by all means, just provide them the link. That's not a problem at all.
Thank you very much. And do you mind repeating the Facebook pages where you also...
on Facebook, if you do, hang on, I'll just put it. It's pretty much on every one of them, but the ones that are common are Callers in Training, Newbie Callers. Well, if you just log on to those are all newer callers will log on to that. Most of them are posted there. Don Beck also does a session on Sundays. His is a few hours earlier than mine. Him and Dan Like do a session. They had Mike Seastrom on today. Very interesting session. And most of the links to these you can find there. And there's also Square Dance pages. There's Square Dancing Australia. Most of the links to all of these sessions are posted there. And as I said, if you're interested in some of the previous sessions, if you go to Orange County Callers or OC Callers, you'll find the presentations, the video, and all the handout notes for most of the sessions. You can find them all there as well as links to other presentations.
Thank you very much.
No problem. Chris, you're muted. I saw your lips moving, but I didn't hear you.
Yeah, I was just saying, I love going to both of these Zoom sessions. Don's, which is in the morning for me, and yours, which is in the evening. I get a lot out of both of them.
I'm glad.
See, I was wondering, Mel, where are you originally from? Because your accent does not sound Australian.
Originally, I'm from Canada. I was born in Edmonton. I grew up in, I call the Okanagan Valley of British Columbia home. My last 15 years in Canada, I was playing soldier for a living, and I actually spent only 3 years of that actually in the country. So, and right now I live in Australia.
How long have you been there?
About 15 years.
From New Zealand, who ever get on here?
Key comes on occasionally. There have been a couple of others. Key Leong Tu, he comes on occasionally. But we get callers from Japan. We've had a couple come in from Russia, from Europe, from Sweden, from the UK, from the US, and from Australia, and Canada. Depends. We get various sizes of crowds. I think our largest was 114. Our average is about 30 for these sessions. Well, that seems to be a natural pause, or everybody has muted, or my computer is locked up. For those of you that were recording, if you find that your recording stopped partway during the discussion, my internet got disconnected. I have a feeling that was probably my wife telling me I've been on the internet too long again. she unplugged it, but no, it wouldn't have been her because it wouldn't have come back that fast. But I managed to slip Mark as the co-host fast enough that I don't think the session was interrupted. You were still here, but your recording may have stopped at that particular time. If it is, I apologize for that.
Mine kept going, Mel.
Yeah, I noticed a lot of people were having lockup problems today.
Well, thanks for all these sessions, Mel. It's awesome.
No problem. So does anybody have anything they want to look at or discuss? If not, we'll look at calling it a day. I'm almost back to physical capability, so my wife will probably have me out cutting the lawn this morning if she hasn't already done it. Come on, nobody's saying anything. You guys want me to get out and do some work. Darn. All right, well, we'll call it a day then. Thank you very much, everybody, for tuning in. I hope you've enjoyed it, and I hope to see you next week. I'll have the session for next week posted as soon as I can.
Okay.
Take care, everybody.
Bye, everybody. See you next week.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.